Here.
Kane? Comitas?
Yes.
Landers?
Yes.
Rapp?
Yes.
Beats? Schrader?
Yes.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If we could have a motion to approve our regular meeting agenda, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda as presented.
In a second.
Second.
And roll call.
Cost?
Yes.
Kane? Comitas?
Yes.
Landers?
Yes.
Rapp?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes.
We thank you all for being here. Is there anyone that wishes to have this opportunity for public comment? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carolyn Moore. I've introduced myself to a few of you already. I am running for the LaSalle County Board and have been attending school board meetings in the district. Last night I was in Dimmick, and I was also at Waltham, same night. Had to stretch myself a little bit there. Earlier this week I was at Mendota High School. And so I'm very interested in the educational aspect of how LaSalle County can help you. So if you have any questions, I have some business cards. I am a retired math teacher, consultant, and author for McGraw-Hill Publishing Company, but I was in the classroom as well. I live in Dimmick, been there for 45 years with my husband Bernie Moore, who some of you may know as a coach, athletic director from St. Bede, and a dean of students, but he also umpires and referees games and has done it here. I would like to make some sort of connection. I'm very interested in the financial ends of things like TIFs, and have been getting some coaching from Ryan Linig, if you know him. He's the superintendent at Dimmick, and just would be happy to talk to anybody anytime about education and what the county board might do for you. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, then could we please have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, including the disposition of minutes for September 2022, payment of bills, district treasurer's report, in-person activity fund report, cafeteria report, and personnel report.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconds, roll call please.
Comitas?
Yes.
Landers?
Yes.
Rapp?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes.
Cost?
Yes.
Moving on to our informational items. Item 6A, the FOIA requests. We had one.
Yeah, random big company wanting to get copies of bills off of our management software, so easy.
Commercial request.
Yep.
All right, 6B on here, administrator report, and then all of your friends that you brought along.
Lots of friends, and so, you know, we're definitely fortunate. Go ahead and start with Bill Newkirk. His auditing firm does great work. They come in, they're very thorough, spend a couple days combing over everything. Always have a couple of good recommendations. Last year, if you'll recall, they had a recommendation on inventory. We were able to put in a better inventory system because of that process. And so, you know, it's always a good idea to bring a new fresh set of eyes in, have a look, and if they can you know, recommend a thing or two every year to put in place, make you a little better organization, then we really appreciate that. School auditors are hard to come by, and good ones even harder, and so we appreciate this partnership. So without further ado, young man, all yours.
Thank you. So the audit report you have in front of you, I'm gonna hit just a few highlights. I'm not gonna go page by page. I think you guys, I've been here a few years. I'm not gonna take a half an hour and put you to sleep. So I'm just gonna dive right in. If we go 3 or 4 pages into this, it'll say page 3 and page 4. You've got page 3 is a portrait and then a landscape page for page 4. I highlight this every year. So this is the financial profile summary. So this is a 30,000 foot view. Basically on page 4, we have 5 financial metrics that ISB looks at every district in the state. And essentially they're looking at how much cash you have on hand, your revenues versus expenditures that you're not running a big deficit or anything like that, and then how much debt the district has. And they rank these 5 metrics on a scale of 1 to 4, 1 being the worst score, 4 being the best. The only place that you guys lost 1/10 of a point, you scored 3 out of 4 on the days cash on hand. Basically, how much cash you had in the bank on June 30th. They want at least basically half a school year that you could float. I think this metric is a little bit flawed in some ways as well, because if you go to DeKalb County, let's say, they get some of their property tax money early. So LaSalle, Lee, and Bureau County, where you guys get property tax, they don't pay any of the 2021 levy until after July 1st of 22. So this to me is a really apples and oranges comparison. There is another schedule in the audit where we highlight how much money is expected and how much early tax dollars were received, but it's not factored into this metric. So the fact that you lost a point there, I think in some ways isn't really fair if you were comparing this to a district, say in DeKalb County, where I know they pay out early property taxes. So I just want to point that out. Other than that, you got perfect 4s across the board. If we flip 2 pages forward to pages 7 and 8, so pages 7 and 8, this is a high-level income statement by fund. And the way this works, the column goes down across both pages. I think the most important line you're going to want to look at there is 78. Line 78 on page 8 towards the bottom is essentially the net income or loss by fund. You'll see that generally you had net incomes or positive increases in fund balance everywhere except Fund 20. And that largely is related to the construction process or the project that was ongoing. And part of that is an anomaly on a cash basis of accounting. A lot of that's going to be funded by ESSER dollars, but the way that works is in May and June, you probably paid some big invoices on that then the revenue doesn't come in until July or August. So we have the expenditures in fiscal year 22 that we're looking at, and the revenue in 23. So for a couple of years, especially with ESSER money across, I audit 16 districts, and we see it across the board. This ESSER money is causing some weird anomalies in the financial statement sometimes because of that timing, especially if you have a big construction project going on where you get expenditure in one year that you're not picking the revenue up until the next, especially on those summer projects that as soon as school is out, you went hard and there were probably some big invoices in June. Again, common in a lot of districts.
Yeah, and so you have to keep that in mind moving forward, that that's gonna impact this year as well. Because we'll have some of those July and August revenues that will show up as revenues in this year's budget, and so it will make that revenue number for this year look kind of artificially high. So
Exactly.
You have to be cognizant of that.
Yep. So the next 15 pages or so are like a gory detail of all the revenues and expenditures. There's nothing there really that I want to highlight. I'm going to skip pretty far forward to another ISB metric that's on page 37 and 38 of the report. So this looks at operating expense per pupil. So it's a big calculation. Again, this is an ISB metric. Every district in the state of Illinois completes this. At the bottom of 38, that bottom number, about $12,000 operating expense per pupil. That essentially looks at how many students you had, average daily attendance, and what the total operating costs were in a ratio there. It's a metric to keep an eye on within the district year over year controlling, but it's also a way that you could compare to peer districts as well. In general, I audited a number of similar elementary districts in LaSalle County. This is probably around average or maybe a little on the low side, especially, I mean, if you were to compare to, say, a Waltham or a Dimick or somebody that has much lower pupil counts, again, I mean, it's a division problem that if you divide the operating expense by less pupils, that number's naturally higher. So the fact that you guys have more students in some of those districts will naturally pull this a little bit lower than those little districts. So, I mean, if you were comparing it to another district, I guess I'm saying you probably need to take it with a grain of salt or make sure you're apples to apples and not comparing yourself to, say, Dimick or something like that. The very next page is another metric there that this is the per capita tuition charge. So the bottom of page 39 there, that 8,200 and change, that's what you would charge an out-of-district student if they wanted to attend Mendota. The reason that number is so much lower than the operating expense per pupil is you're adding back a bunch of the grant revenue. Essentially, when you're charging somebody out-of-district tuition, it's because they don't pay property taxes in the district, so you're only charging them for the local dollars that are lost. If there's state and federal money that comes in there, that doesn't really change or isn't impacted by an out-of-district student coming in. So that's why that number is lower than the total operating expense. I think those are the highlights in the AFR. If we flip forward 5 or 6 more pages, you'll start hitting some pages on my letterhead, and I'm quickly going to describe this. Ultimately, this is what you're paying for. So, in audit opinion, this first one is on the financial statement. So this is what you would normally think of with an audit. This says we went through the books and records and everything looked good. The key there is the second paragraph says unmodified opinion on regulatory basis. So unmodified is a clean, good audit opinion. That's what, if ISB or an outside creditor or taxpayer, somebody's looking, unmodified opinion is what you want. That means we've gone through and everything looks good. Regulatory basis of accounting, we're talking about the fact that you follow the cash basis of accounting, which we talked about. That can create some anomalies and things. Most districts in the state of Illinois follow the cash basis of accounting. That's not unusual. But because of that, the very next paragraph, we have to give an adverse opinion on US GAAP. So basically, you don't follow generally accepted accounting principles, which would be an accrual basis of accounting. We just have to highlight that to a reader. Again, it's not an issue. It's just, it has to be disclosed that we are doing this on a cash basis. So that's the financial statement audit. That's how much money's in the bank, the revenues, expenditures. We went through, everything checked out, was good. The next opinion on pages 4 and 5 of these opinion pages, we give an opinion on governmental auditing standards. So ISB requires every district in the state of Illinois to have this opinion. Basically, this is a compliance opinion where Brad was talking about how we would give recommendations and things like that. We're required to look at certain aspects of the Illinois school code and grant compliance and some things like that, and identify if there are any issues. Again, this is a clean, good opinion, no findings at all this year on anything. So the last opinion that we give, if we flip to pages 6 and 7, this is what's called a single audit opinion. So single audit is a federal act that requires any entity that expends over $750,000 of federal revenue has to have an audit specific to those federal programs. So because of the size of Title I and IDEA and the National School Lunch Program, we've always done a single audit. This year, and I believe last year too, we focus on the ESSER programs just because those are the biggest programs. I'll highlight in the back exactly how that works out. But we did have a finding last year related to tracking equipment assets that are purchased with federal funds. You're required to keep an inventory, track those, make sure that they're not disappearing. If they're damaged, that you properly document. If they're being disposed of, you have to do certain things with that. The district's IT department put a really solid inventory, I think, of both federal and non-federally purchased assets in place. But a lot of those Chromebooks and things like that were purchased with ESSER dollars over the last 2 years, a lot of those were purchased with federal dollars. So that inventory with serial numbers and everything is what you've got to have in order to make sure that you're dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Really, when it comes to grant compliance, that's what it's all about. So that was implemented, so we don't have a finding on that or anything else this year. So that's good. So again, this is an unmodified, good, clean opinion across the board there. The notes to the financial statements come next, and a lot of that just talks about like policies and procedures and assumptions for the district. I'm going to flip all the way forward to page notes 14. We talk about the long-term debt, and I like to point this out. So at the bottom there, it has in total the debt activity for the year. There was no new debt issued, so this is just the payoff there, and that schedule at the bottom. And if you flip to the next page on 15, it shows there's 3 outstanding issues as of June 30th of 22, and this shows over the next 4 fiscal years what the repayment schedule on each of those is to get them paid off. On page 16, we note there were a number of funds that had expenditures over budget. Most of those are really close. The one big outlier, operations and maintenance, I think that was largely related to the ESSER project. I don't mean to kick a dead horse, but that again happened in a lot of districts, that when you budgeted this time last year, a lot of those ESSER grants weren't written yet. So a lot of those expenditures that were being covered by grant funds weren't written into the budget. So again, that is a common theme across a lot of districts, that expenditures were over budget because of that. So then the last part of the report here goes into the stuff on the single audit. And if we flip forward, it'll be pages 48 and 49 is what or 49 and 50 rather, I'm sorry. Page 50 is a high level summary of the single audit. Basically at the top, the fact that X's are down that right hand column where it no on everything, that's a good sign. That's asking if there's any deficiencies in internal controls, if there's any findings with anything. So the fact that those are all marked no. Then that table, so the ESSER expenditures this year were 1.7 million out of a total federal expenditures of 3.2 million. So that made up 54% of the district's federal expenditures just in that one program. Basically, the way that this works, we're required to test 40% of the district's federal expenditures. So this table is disclosing how we calculated and chose what major programs we had. So because of the size of ESSER, we were able to test that as the only major program. So that's the meat and potatoes of it. Again, I go through pretty quick. I'm happy to answer any specific questions that anybody might have. The packet in the back is required communication with the board. I'm not really going to spend any time because again, this would be more significant if there were findings or issues. I have to put things in writing regarding that. But those pages pretty much are boilerplate language that says everything looked good. We had no adjusting journal entries at all this year, which is really a testament to Denise and Justine on a month-to-month basis, and the treasurer having good checks and balances and making sure things get recorded correctly, that you guys aren't requiring or relying on me as the auditor to come in and really adjust things or clean things up. Again, I audit 16 districts, and there's only a couple of them that I have no journal entries for. So that really is kudos to those ladies for the work that they do, that we can come in and be efficient with our audit, that we're not cleaning up a mess or correcting your books because they're good. So
Questions, anyone? No? I don't think so.
And even though there weren't any significant formal findings, we still have lots of conversations while the auditors are here. And
Right.
So they still give us some really good ideas on some little tweaks that we can make to be a little more effective.
right,
Yep. And so we really appreciate that.
yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. We appreciate the perspective of having you for multiple years and being able to make that comparison.
All
I
right.
came here in second grade.
And what are you, like in 20th grade now? Or?
It's gonna take over.
I'm in third grade.
Oh,
Oh,
third
okay.
grade. Oh my goodness.
Okay,
Well,
good
pretty soon
stuff.
we'll see you in the suit.
There you
No,
go.
he said no.
I'm not being a captain.
Well,
Well, thank
take
you both
care.
for being
Thank
here.
you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Thanks, you too.
That's what happens when you're in third grade.
It's good stuff. GRP Wakeland is here.
Oh. Brad's bringing all his friends to the table.
That is
All his friends for what? What was that?
He's bringing all his friends to the table. He stocked the room here tonight.
A little bit.
Next one, 2100.
You wanna hand it up, Jeff?
Yeah, I must have not.
Are you using up all my?
Huh?
I was like, what's going
You
on?
guys mind if I just sit down so I can put it in my lap? If
Yes,
That's all right.
feel free to be comfortable.
Still put it in
So
my
Holly,
lap.
are you saying you're using up all my friends?
No, I'm just saying nobody will be here Monday, or on that Monday, because it's the week before Thanksgiving.
So we actually had presentations from next month.
No, I know, I mean, all the other friends.
She means her other friends outside.
The other
People
friends.
that don't have that.
Outside people that report to you.
I got you. No, fair enough, fair enough.
Thank you.
I'm excited about this.
I like the color your print jobs.
I appreciate you guys waiting a month for me. I was able to celebrate my anniversary with my
Well,
wife.
yes,
so
happy
that was
anniversary. We
very appreciative that I wasn't able to get here in September and you guys understood.
Thank you.
So what Alyssa and I are actually here to talk about today is what we had talked about 2 board meetings ago, I believe, which is secure entrances, security in general for the building. And then we mentioned that we would be looking at solar as well, just because there's some really good opportunities out there and we would present those to you. So what we've got and presented here to you on the front page is basically what we call our options chart, so that we can look at different scenarios, so that you guys can think about the ranges of where items are falling, and we'll go into some detail into each building as we flip through. It is paper clipped together so that you'll be able to keep the options chart in front of you if you'd like to look at another section as we go. So we kind of set this up to start with, quite honestly, the most complicated items on here, which is Northbrook, because that's the one that we're looking at the most, with the most options for you to look at, because I think it's the school that, you know, hasn't had the new addition and different things where entrances have changed over the years. So if we start at Northbrook and you look at your drawing there, which will be, I believe, 3 pages in. Yep, 3 pages in. So if you want to break it up, it might make it a little bit easier for you.
It's this one.
It's the color, it's got the best color to it. Thank you. So what we had looked at Northbrook, and what we had looked at all the buildings, was how do you create a secure entrance? Because right now you guys have different ways of entering buildings, and in some situations you have direct access if a student or somebody happens to be in those areas. So the basic option that we looked at Northbrook was actually just creating that secure entrance that pushes people directly into the office. And that would be dealing with the exterior. As you can see, we'll be doing some exterior work on the doors, just the doors into the vestibule area, and then adding that second set of doors that creates a vestibule. So I don't know if most people realize, but there are 2 sets of doors already there with the vestibule, but once you're through those, you're still in the main area. So we're essentially creating the newest area at the end of the hallway before the ramp or the stairs. So kind of how this would be set up is those new doors, or the existing doors, would be able to be unlocked, and then you can get buzzed in from there, but then you still have to come into the office through a buzzing system, how you guys want that set up, and check in with somebody before you would ever have access to a teacher, to a student, or to any public space within the building.
So when you look at this, I kind of think of it as a double buzz. You get buzzed to get in, to come into the office, and then if for some reason you would need to go into the heart of the building, then you would get buzzed in through the new set of doors as well.
So this is the most straightforward. It's cleaning up the doors in the front, creating that vestibule, making sure that people can come in. That's how you can create a secure entrance. And then we went into a second option, which is actually helping to secure the entire front of the building. Because you do have that large glass into your gymnasium as well, with the doors right next to it, as well as new doors in front. So it's building upon what we had just talked about, but then actually doing full replacement of all those doors and all of that glass. And it's actually with the glass that you don't call it bulletproof. It's, if you were to look it up, you can see some of this, and if you've ever looked it up before, but it's a glass that actually a bullet will go through, but you can't gain access through. Like a lot of the videos do show like somebody trying to beat on it with a bat, or actually shooting through it until their round, their clip is empty, and it's still not being there, and they have to beat on it to eventually get in, because it's all like sticking together and stays within the frame. So while you could shoot through it, because bulletproof glass, it is a thing, obviously we've heard about those sort of things, but it's incredibly thick, incredibly expensive, and it's not practical for these sort of applications. It's to keep people from getting in and creating mass chaos and mass issues. So that's what goes into that new construction of replacing those doors and the glass in that area. So that would be those areas to the gymnasium as well as into the building. And then we go a little bit further into a front office renovation for Northbrook. And what that is that's actually realigning how the front office is set up, because right now it's a little bit choppy in as far as the flow that would work within there. And it also adds some new windows from the principal's office. There's actually a rendering that we'll talk about. It's on this, about 3 pages in. I'll hold it up too. So what this actually does is it lowers the windows a little bit, so that the principal can actually see out a little bit easier than they could currently see by having to stand up and see. They'll be able to look out and see if something's going on out there. You know, especially we've been here at the end of the school day, you have, 40, 50 students that are hanging out there, whether they're waiting for a ride or waiting for their turn on the bus or whatever that situation. Sometimes just hanging out, because kids will be kids and it's fun to do that. So they would be able to see if anything was going on out there, besides the catastrophic things that we talk about as well. And I actually believe I skipped over one section, which was the main entrance exterior improvements, and I apologize for that. That actually would be making improvements out there with, to that rendering, which is cleaning it up. If you've ever noticed out there, and it may be something that you guys don't even notice as much because you've been seeing it for so many years. But simple things like the gutter. The gutter actually runs down the wall and then to the edge because of how the roof was originally set up. If you can see that on this drawing a little bit better. So you can actually see how we could reroute that gutter. So the first thing you see when you come in is not a gutter. You can clean up the underside of the soffit with new lights, new fixtures. Also, what we've talked about is where you've got that planter box currently, cleaning that up and making those almost like, I would call it like exterior stage seating. So again, those kids that are hanging out and waiting, they're hanging out there and waiting, and they could sit and talk and do whatever they do, and then move on from there. And I think that's more inviting to the kids that may get here early, maybe hanging out later. But you're seeing those sort of applications to make the front of the building welcoming to kids, but not necessarily having to always let them in right when they get here, because there's an environment for them to hang out as well. So those would be the improvements we would be looking at for the outside. And just some general cleanup when it comes to that as well. Any questions on Northbrook?
So the gym would still have the same number of doors into it? It would, and all that glass, like all that would still be there?
All that would still be there, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We would probably be going with a different glass, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, that's set up for a gymnasium so that you don't have the chain link fence thing that you have currently
Okay.
blocking
Yeah,
it from
the-
breaking it. There's actually glass that's designed for gyms to take an impact.
Okay.
I wouldn't ideally be playing a hard baseball in there and hitting a
Sure.
home run directly into it, but in theory, it's set up to be able to withstand that as well.
Okay.
I forget exactly what it's called, but that's usually what we put in gymnasiums that get used for those sort of things. Specifically more at high schools usually, but we would put it in here too, because there's a chance a kid could go in there with a hard ball and hit
Mhm.
something at it as well.
So in the renderings, this one, not the rendering, the drawing
Yeah.
here, when it comes in, that's the same width as the existing vestibule is right now.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talked about like extending it, it's just that like wide open space that's out front of the office is now lengthened? Like the vestibule comes in further into the lobby? Am I
So the
saying that right?
existing vestibule would stay just like it is.
Okay.
What we'd be creating is a secondary vestibule that's like your secure area where you could have people wait, like if you did have a parent come in rather than having them wait in the office area.
Mhm.
We have customers that put like chairs out in those
Mhm.
areas, and that's where they would wait as their student comes out, because they've already done the check-in, check-out process, and then they're able to leave with the student, or if they're just dropping something off, they can just drop it off up there.
So is that that whole, like after you make entrance into that second set of doors and there's that weird like long hallway before the ramp and stairs, like that's the secondary?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's about where the cutoff
Okay.
starts, yeah.
And it would allow us to keep the first set of doors unlocked. So if somebody's just dropping off a lunch, or they wouldn't even need to be buzzed into the first set of doors. And we would set some tables in that short vestibule, and so we could create an environment that would really cut down on even people coming into the office.
And then that
itself.
earphone and camera then is in that first
Yep.
vestibule
Yep.
instead of an outside.
Yep.
Okay.
Any questions? No? Okay, all right, then we will go on to Lincoln Elementary. Oh, I did skip over the district office, so there is some improvements on secure entrance at the district office here. But they're just, I don't wanna oversimplify something, but compared to the other areas, that's what we're highlighting.
Okay.
Sticking. All right. So at Lincoln and at Blackstone, they are set up a little bit more straightforward to be able to do secure entrances. And you can see here at Lincoln, what we'd be creating again is another vestibule area where you can do a check-in process and that they can be verified before they're ever allowed into the building. Again, a smaller vestibule, but still a vestibule where chairs, a table, the items Brad was just mentioning can be set out there so that not necessarily everybody has to come into the school. And then what you would do is just do a little bit of office interior renovations with like your furniture layouts into those space. But again, creating that secure vestibule into the space.
So it's just adding a second wall just inside of the existing, like the
Yeah.
exterior door and everything.
Yeah, and then the HVAC and the painting and things that go
Mhm.
with that, but ultimately, in regards to the security side of things, that's what ties into that.
So then is this one like the other one where once you're in the office, you would, I know there's an old wooden door there between the office and the interior. Would that be a different door that would require you to be buzzed into the school then, or one from the office?
We've looked at it that way, yeah, and
Okay.
each school district, not school necessarily, because you guys will come up with your standard practice, but each one honestly seems to always handle it a little bit differently.
Okay.
But the buzzer is a key thing, because depending on how you wanna set up that office furniture, then they couldn't come straight through that door straight in. You know,
Okay.
I do have some that set up furniture and don't do a buzzer, and that way they kinda have
Slow it
something
down.
that's in their
Mhm.
way.
Okay.
And I guess I'd like to clarify too, when we're creating this wall by the desk, you know, if you've been into Lincoln, right now the way they have it, it's, when you first walk in, there's like that bookcase where they're
Mhm.
able to store files, and what we would be envisioning for this is reworking that so that it's a window, so that whoever's sitting, they could kind of see through without
Okay.
having to, you know, have a camera, you kind of get the direct line of sight to be able to gauge, you know, who's visiting, things like that.
I
Great.
was just gonna ask that, because
Mhm.
that's kind of blocked.
Mm-hmm. Good.
That good for Lincoln?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then Blackstone. Blackstone's actually the most straightforward to a certain extent because of what can be created, because there already is a vestibule there. It just needs the doors, but then it does need some reworking of the doors because where that additional red door that's coming into the office is currently all glass. So we would be working through that glass as well, again, with the glass that we've been talking about, so that there is a barrier of people coming in, being able to buzz in. They actually just got new furniture and how that would lay out. I would envision a secondary buzzer being necessary because I don't think they're gonna wanna rearrange their furniture because they just got new furniture. But a secondary buzzer that would allow them into the building from there. But this one, actually, the line of sight is already really good with the existing windows that you do have into that space, but now you're creating a way to make them come into the office versus going straight into the building.
Does that principal exit, is that still an entrance into that main vestibule area, into the principal's office?
That door was discussed, and at this point, it was just a plan to keep it. It's not used frequently, actually, she has a piece of furniture in front of it right now. But in conversations, it's the locked door, so
Okay.
it seemed like it just made sense to leave it rather than spend money to take it out.
Okay.
All right, okay. So then the other items that we had taken a look at was, again, going with security, is door security. So one of the objectives in conversations with the district is we need every door in this building to be able to be shut and locked and shut the way it's supposed to with a closer and be able to be locked. So there's drawings here that show every door for every building that we've assessed. And some doors cause some challenges and some don't, depending on what's going on structurally or different codes get involved when you deal with different doors. But we do believe we'll be able to accommodate everything that you've asked for. So every door within the district will be a door lock set that's familiar to every teacher because it's gonna be the same lock everywhere. So if they happen to be taking a class to PE or lunch and lockdown comes and there's an empty classroom, that teacher can go right in there and know how to deal with that door as well. And then closers will work, doors will seal, the closer will close it if somebody rushes in and forgets to turn it behind them. So what that entails is, you know, some, like Lincoln, for example, what we'd have to do is actually replace the door slab, the frame, and then the glass above it. And all that is because it's all one assembly is potentially what we would need to do in those situations. And that's just because things have moved, the building shifted, I mean, think about the age of the building. Then we've got other areas where we just need to do the locks, and the doors for the most part are fully functional and not a problem. So that's a key thing for security when you're thinking about your lockdown drills and making sure that everybody can get inside a space without any problems.
And as you're looking at the exhibit I put together, just to clarify, the blue doors that are highlighted, those are the doors that we wouldn't be changing the door or anything, it's just changing the locks to make sure they're intruder grade. Red doors are doors that would have a full replacement with hardware, the door itself and the frame, and then the purple doors are also gonna be a full replacement, but they signify double doors essentially. So that's the clarification on that, if there's any questions there.
And then there's the exterior door improvements as well, which is analyzing all of your exterior doors and replacing the necessary hardware on those doors and painting those doors. Alyssa's been around to be able to look at all the different doors and walk with some different subcontractors and project managers looking at them. And steel doors are steel doors. The key is making sure that they function correctly, that they close, that they latch, that they do exactly what they're designed to do. So in the most part of looking at all of them, it's just painting and refreshing them, because a steel door that's just been painted doesn't look any different than a steel door that we were to buy today and put up a new one, and there's not a need to replace them from what we've evaluated. But definitely the hardware that sticks or doesn't latch, and addressing that and making sure that everything is packed square and closing. When somebody goes out to recess or a kid goes out there after school and, you know, a door accidentally gets left open, not on purpose, it didn't close all the way and latch. So it's addressing those sort of things on your exterior doors.
And then also includes external door card reader systems.
Yes, sorry, thank you very much. Yeah, so then there's exterior door card readers on the doors, and those have been strategically placed to correlate with people being able to get in and out into the building as well, without having to break out keys.
And then the internal keys can be like a master key, so those same teachers carrying around the keys to get in and out of each door.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways we can set up the keys, and did you just have a bunch of keys, is that what you're saying?
No, I showed,
Oh,
yeah, she
Oh,
works in my district too, so I was
Okay.
like,
Okay,
Mine are here.
Yep, it is nice, because then you can set
Yeah.
times that people
Yeah.
can be in the building, you can see who goes in the building at what time.
yeah, so you can set that up, and that is a key thing, because I'm sure there's a few master keys laying around that people don't even know who has. I mean, I grew up in Seneca, as you guys know, and everybody seemed to have a key to the gym after a while. Over all the years, like, how'd you get it? I've got a key. Oh, okay. So that does help clean up that. And then to your point of keying, yeah, we can key these a couple different ways to like the true master that's
Right.
everywhere, and then you can scale down and have different versions of who has what in the district.
This is kind of a looking forward question, but like, what is our plan to like check over the years that some of those outside doors don't start getting bad again and not closing all the way again, and like keeping up with that if we're like, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. You know, once, again, your exterior doors, what they're gonna do when they go through is make sure that they're going to be viable long-term. And so, you know, it's not that, you know, 6 months or 2 years from now, I mean, we'll have door issues. These are steel doors, heavy construction, and so if they can't certify that those doors aren't gonna last long-term, then those are the ones that they're gonna replace.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that is the key, is making sure that they do it. And to your point, a lot of it's just checking, and, you know, things just don't get checked always, and I'm sure you guys can put that on your preventive maintenance, so every summer, walk around, look at the doors and see what's going on, and work it through that system, once they've been up to date, because I'm sure there's been some tinkering, but it's tinkering with what's existing versus actually buying new and doing what needs to be done.
And that's actually why I kind of started to look at Brad mid-question too, because I'm like, it's not really their issue, it's our issue.
We can send somebody out yearly
But I
if you'd
just
like.
know, like,
I think
even-
our custodians
I
can
think
handle
your
that.
custodians
couldn't
can
they?
handle it.
even
though.
brand new things that are meant to work with weather and, you know, just things sometimes.
Well, and kids will be kids, we've all watched them slam the
Yeah,
door
like-
open and then,
Yeah, even after 2 years, it could
Yeah.
just maybe start not latching, and it wasn't like malfunction of the door, but just,
yeah,
yeah.
adjustments.
And it's gonna be retraining from the interior side.
Right.
Cause I know, at least at Lincoln for sure, like that second story, like they use the pool noodles to keep the doors open, which is not within fire
Right.
code or
Or
school
safety.
code anyways.
Well, it's kinda like over here when we did the walkthrough and they had the door stoppers.
Yeah, it's the same thing, they're using
Yeah.
the pool noodles on the thing, so
Yeah.
it'll be retraining everyone. It's,
Certainly.
it's school code, but it's also just the safest option for our kiddos.
Yep.
Okay.
Did you? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think so.
Are you guys okay to talk about the solar then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So with the solar, what I would suggest is there's 2 pages there with roofing. First one being Lincoln, and then the second one being Northbrook. It's got a nice roof chart here. So with solar, taking a look at it, what you've got here in front of you is a breakdown of how that solar would be placed on each building. And your roof situations for each building is what we're focusing in on. So at Blackstone, you actually have newer roofs there within the last couple of years. So we wouldn't need to do any roofing at Blackstone. And you can see where we would be putting all of these solar panels. This is approximate. I mean, we would get into, if this is something that you guys continue to be interested in, we would get into the full structural design to make sure that this is where they would go. But you can see we do have capacity to be able to put them if we have to move some here or there. We don't usually run into any major issues when it comes to the structural because these things don't weigh more than what most roofs are designed for anyways on their snow load, so they're used to being able to handle this, so it hasn't been a major issue. If you look at your consumption there versus your production, what you can see is everything in gray is your consumption and then everything in green is your production. So what will end up happening with solar in these situations is anytime that you have more green than gray, it actually moves over to the next month and moves over to the next month. You get a credit for those because all of these are actually behind the meter, so they're fed from the solar panels into your school first, and if your school doesn't use them, then they go back onto the main grid system that gets used by the neighboring homes, people in the area, and they can travel wherever it needs. So you get a credit from ComEd for doing that. And then on the months where you have more gray than green, that's where you eat against those credits. So that's how net metering is set up, and that's what works and makes these viable for school districts to try to do, or anybody for that matter, but specifically large scale. So when you look at Lincoln, where we've got to put them on Lincoln is actually the entire roof. And the Lincoln roof is running at about, you say 14 years old? Yeah, around 14 years old, so obviously the new construction, and then it turns out you did the roofs, some work on the roofs then. We noticed 3 and 4 are the roofs that are probably in the worst shape. If we were just doing roofs not pushed by solar, those would be ones that we'd be recommending in the near future anyways. But in this situation, you would have to do all the roofs to be able to put the solar on there. I wouldn't encourage you to put solar on roofs that are that old. Again, you can see the chart, same description, how it moves across. And then we go to Northbrook. And Northbrook would be, quite a bit of solar will be on the roofs that we just did this past summer. But we would also have to do roof 2, we'd have to do roof 9, and we'd have to do roof 8 to accommodate the amount of solar that would be needed at Northbrook. You guys had requested, and I passed over it on that options chart, that we would do roof 3 and roof 1. Those were roofs that you guys have been having issues with anyways, but that's not where we'd be putting solar anyways, because those are metal roofs that have a different roofing system that goes on top of them, whereas these other roofs make the most sense. That make sense?
And
All right.
not on Route 7 either,
Pardon me?
not on 7 either.
No, we wouldn't be putting any on roof 7. No. So you would still have those roofs in the future, but these would be the roofs that you would need to be doing to be able to do the solar. So if you look at the financials is ultimately what drives solar, in my personal opinion. So I'm gonna look at the totals, if that's okay with you guys. It's broken down per building, but I will focus on the totals for the sizes. So you can see we'd be putting in a 711 DC size system throughout the entire district. And what that would produce is 935,900 kilowatt hours on an annual basis. And then it goes into a 20-year production and a 30-year production with degradation. So just so everybody knows what degradation is these solar panels actually lose efficiency as they age. So we have to take that into consideration when we're looking at these numbers. So it's not the 935, 900 times 20 and then times 30. It's taking into account the degradation that these solar panels would work. Solar panels come with a 25-year warranty. The life expectancy of a solar panel is around 40 years. So that's where we're comfortable showing you something, you know, that's got a 30-year production with degradation as well. Your annual consumption throughout the entire district is 972,321. So we're looking at offsetting around 96% of your total load for the entire district. And then what that would cost the district to be able to do that is $2.1 million would be what it would cost the district in the contract to be able to do solar, which is a large number, obviously. But now we're gonna get into the reasons that I think it makes sense. So the SREC program, which is driven by the state of Illinois, would give you $1 million towards that $2.1 million. The smart inverter rebate, which is from ComEd, and we would have to analyze that a little bit deeper, but they would give you $177,750. And then this investment tax credit, which is really the biggest change recently, would give you $632,000 towards solar.
And is that a federal program?
That's a federal program. It's a one-time check that comes to you guys after you have your solar up and running.
Is that the same for the smart investor rebate? Is that a one-time?
That's a one-time,
payment?
yep,
Okay.
from ComEd. And then the SREC program is paid over a 7-year period. They mail you a check annually. You take 1,010,000 divided by 7, and that's what they pay you annually for 7 years.
That was the investment tax credit one?
That was the SREC program.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yep.
The other one was one time. you
Yep,
said. Okay.
one time. And that actually didn't used to exist for you guys. That's where like private investors would own solar. Or if they, you know, a company put it on, that's what they would get. Well, the federal government found a way to make sure the public entities could get that incentive as well. Since you guys don't pay taxes, they're just gonna write you a check that they would have given had you guys been a tax-paying entity. So your cost after all the incentives is $286,122. So when you look at it that way, you can see why right now is a prime time to be thinking about solar for public schools. So then the way I always break these down is what does that kilowatt hour cost you just for the energy, not the supply, just the energy, and comparing that to where things stand today. So currently you guys are paying 0.036 cents per kilowatt hour, currently. When you go out to rebid that, I believe that's going to be going up because energy rates are going up. But what you're able to do by doing the solar is lock in 0.01529 cents for a 20-year period. If you looked at that over a 30-year period, you'd actually be locking in 0.01019 cents. So that is not taking into account savings from supply, because again, this was behind the meter. You're not paying those distribution charges because you're not getting distribution from them. You still would have demand charges, which they hit you with, which is a charge if the solar was not working or the clouds were completely up and you needed all the power that you've ever asked for, they still have to provide that to you. And because of that capacity, it's a capacity factor, they charge you for that and you can't do anything about that. You will get some of that reduced because when you have solar is your hottest day and that's when the most is going on. I don't know if anybody here knows or works with anybody that works at a power plant for ComEd and they do their shutdowns in the winter. That's why they do their shutdowns in the winter, because in the summer they need all their reactors working for that peak time when everybody gets home at 5 o'clock and turns their air conditioning down and everything's firing up. That's what's a demand charge. And this will help with that, but we don't take that into consideration because if a cloud came over when all your equipment was firing up, you would still have the same charge. That shouldn't happen, but it could. So that's why we're pretty conservative with our numbers when we're looking at this.
Now the 88% at Lincoln, is that just because there's not enough roof
Yeah,
coverage?
it's as much as we could get up there. And Lincoln is a challenge just because it's a multi-story building.
Mhm.
You know, there's only so much roof versus square footage you actually have.
Mhm.
And yeah, we could put some on the ground, but I don't know where you would at Lincoln. And I wouldn't encourage, I don't like taking up ground unless you have a ton of ground.
But 96 total is still pretty
Yeah,
close.
it's still a really good percentage of your total.
And the rough cost to remove once 20, 30, 40 possible years go by, what does that look like?
The cost to remove it, it's honestly just the labor of taking it down. We haven't calculated what that cost would be at that
To
point.
pay for disposal
No, and see, there are articles out there that talk about that, but then the latest is that they've been recycling them. And I believe that there's gonna be I believe even 40 years, because they should still be working, that there's probably gonna even be a market for that, just because even though they won't be at what they would be at obviously when they were brand new, but if you got them at the right price or just came and took them off, it's better than paying for anything and you're still getting value out of them, if that makes sense. So the one thing that you would have with this is that you need to replace the roofs that these would go under. So at Northbrook, the roofs that I was just talking about that cover this, you'd be looking at around $630,260 in roofing. And at Lincoln, you'd be looking at $655,030 in roofing.
Where are those numbers at
and
again?
how long of a lifespan do they have left now without putting something on them that we wouldn't have to do?
Okay, so at Northbrook, where they're 14 years old, now roofs come with 20-year warranties. But I don't believe, we weren't able to find any warranty information on those roofs. I'm guessing you have a 10-year or at best a 15-year warranty on those roofs. So the two that we talked about earlier that are in poor shape, I would be putting those on your list to be addressed in the next year or two. The other ones that are in a little bit better shape, I still encourage you, once you get out of warranty, to do something with them, because then you can actually save some money on some insulation and some different things before it causes more destruction.
And
So-
Scott said Northbrook, but he meant Lincoln.
Thank you,
Yeah.
I did.
Okay,
I did
yeah,
mean
I was.
Lincoln.
Yeah, no.
I did mean Lincoln,
So
sorry, I read
Lincoln,
down
3
here.
and 4,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, thank you.
Yes.
So
And-
those are items that within the next 5 years we need to touch base on irregardless.
Correct.
Yeah,
What was the amount again?
Sure.
Or is that listed somewhere?
it's not, it's
Okay.
just right here.
Or something.
Northbrook was 630, I'll just read them numerically, 630,260. And Lincoln was 655,030.
Blackstone is no expense.
And Blackstone, your roof
Because we just redid those summer before last.
is
And
within, yeah.
you can
And we
or
keep-
cannot put
kept
the
the warranty
solar in
information.
piece by piece. So Blackstone's good, ready to go, I can cover their roof today, but I can't do Northbrook at this time without fixing these other things. So this year it could be your project, next year I can have a separate project. Or
You
does it
could,
need to be all at once?
you could do it that way, you will pay more just because of ordering and mobilization and
Yeah.
typical things, but the bigger issue is the program's going away.
Okay.
So like right now, we are basing this off of the current SREC program, but once they reach a tier, they actually reduce the amount that they would give in SRECs. And their whole goal is eventually to not have SRECs for anybody because solar has come down enough that people are putting it in. The best example I can think of is, you know, how everybody got the tax rebates for hybrid cars or electric cars, it's the same idea. Eventually it'll go to zero. What I did here, and you always hear a lot of hearsay that net metering, if you're not in by 2025, you won't be allowed to do net metering anymore either. Because right now, the power companies are required to do net metering. And once you're in, you're in. But if you get in later, then it would have to be looked at differently. Which is that key for those months we're overproducing and getting credit for the months that you weren't using it.
So you would be locked in for life essentially on that metering if it's done before.
Now, I will say yes,
But the
but
obviously.
legislators
Right.
can do whatever the heck they
Yes,
want when
right.
it comes to our utility rates
Yeah.
and supply, because that is what they control. So
Yeah.
in theory, they could say, we're not going to do net metering for anybody,
Yeah.
you know, in 2030 or something to that effect. And that's why I really do try to focus on the rate rather than even the supply stuff, which I've talked to you about, you would see those savings, but that you're able to lock in a rate that's less than that. So let's even say that they do that. I would see more of a compromise of some sort if, you know, the lobbyists from the power companies kept pushing, that they would be required to buy that from you in some way, shape, or form, because they're not gonna say, well, you gotta give us power for free.
Yeah.
So even if they bought it, they'll buy it for more than 0.01 cents from you guys, so you would see a credit back. Does that make sense on how I'm looking at that? That was done with the wind industry a while back in Ameren territory, because Ameren and ComEd were looking at it differently. In Ameren territory, anything you overproduced, they only bought back at what the cheapest they could buy in their region, which at that time, about 10 years ago, was the Tennessee Valley dams, because that's the cheapest power that exists at dam power. So that's what they bought it back at, but even that back then was higher than what this is, so we all know that that's gone up since then. So that's kind of your hedging.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
I don't wanna make any guarantees on
Right.
supply and how they will look at some of that stuff, but, and that's why I try to focus on power purchase today, what you're paying versus what you could lock in for a very long period of time. And then if you even look, if these continue to work and you decide to keep them up there, we didn't even stretch it out any further, but you know, obviously, the longer they're up there, the less it costs you per kilowatt hour.
So the roofs that would need to be redone at Northbrook, what's the current age of those?
Those were redone in 2002, so you're looking at about 20 years. If there was any warranties on it, they're kind of at that point where they're gonna be expiring. So, you know, you're kind of in a similar boat.
And I would be very surprised if 20 years ago you had a 20-year warranty.
Yeah.
So assuming that 20 years is end of life, the Northbrook roofs, the $600,000 in Northbrook roofs that would be replaced in order to put solar on them, those need replaced now anyway, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we would
And
consider
all of them?
operation maintenance.
All of them at Northbrook?
Honestly, yeah, from the best of my knowledge, it's 2002, with the exception of your district office, which is, original construction 2001. These are asphalt shingles and they're architectural asphalt shingles, so they can last anywhere between 20 to 30 years. I was looking at them, they look decent if you wanted to hold off, and prioritize these other roofs.
And it's a big thing if we need to fix something on the roofs and we have these all on there, or it's an easy-ish fix.
Well, you can't, so these are not anchored in, they're ballasted down, so they're weighted down. So you can actually move your solar array around. There's obviously labor cost, and everybody knows labor cost is not cheap. So you could move them, let's say something did come up, you know, on a roof, you know, 10 years, 20 years down the road. You could move them and do the patching that you would necessarily need to do and then put them back right where they were.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but also I believe with the solar panels, you know, once you have solar panels covering your roof, that also just helps with the longevity of the roof in general, because you don't have the sun beating down on it, you know, things like that. So they kind of work in tandem. You know, you do the roof replacement up front and incur that cost, but solar helps protect the lifespan of the roof as well.
What about, like, if bad weather comes through and crushes all this solar panels or something happens to them, what does that look like? Are they like under a warranty for weather, or?
So they're not
Insure
necessarily
them,
under, they're not necessarily under a warranty for weather. They are under a warranty. I think they do actually have some hail warranty. I'd have to double check on that and get back to that to you, but if it is a catastrophic event, it would be handled similar to a catastrophic event to your building, where
So
your
our insurance would cover,
Yep.
and our insurance does cover if we were to do all that solar.
Yeah, it should. It's never been a
Good
question for
question.
anybody else. It is a good question, because you could double check and see if it would affect your premium.
Mhm.
I haven't had one that it did, because they just consider it part of the building. You know, they don't charge more for insurance if you have a brand new roof, or if you have a roof that's 20 years old. I don't think by putting on, I mean, maybe a little bit, because they do ask that on your homeowner's insurance too, how old is your roof, but at the end of the day, they should still cover it, and it shouldn't change it, but it's worth a check with your insurance provider.
And go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And I would assume, since this is where solar panels typically go, is on roofs, it doesn't like affect the warranty of the roof, like if there is a 20-year warranty on the roof, by putting something on the roof on top of that, does that like affect our warranty?
It won't, and that's key even for your existing roof at Blackstone,
Correct,
making sure
yeah.
that that's not a problem. And then obviously with the new roofs, for sure, it wouldn't be a problem because it's part of it. But yeah, we've got to make sure, and we talk to them, and they're used to this at this point.
Okay.
So I feel like my $1 million question is kind of like, and I don't know whether or not you've been able to figure this out, is like, at what point do we break even and or start saving? Like, I know, like, on here you kind of have it for, you know, the offset of the cost, but then clearly there's significant expense with getting us to the point where this is even feasible.
Yeah.
So if you include the cost of new roofs,
Yeah.
okay, you're looking at $1.2 million, $1.3 million for the new roofs. You're looking at $2.1 million for the solar install. So you're in the neighborhood of $3.3, $3.4 million upfront. Then you're going to be reimbursed through grants and credits. Those numbers on the right, that's in the neighborhood of 1.8 million that you get back. So you're left out of pocket with with 1.5 million. Our electric bills are about 80 grand a year in the neighborhood of. So you would calculate that at about an 18-year payback. At about year 18, not only would everything be paid for, but your roofs, which you have to do anyway, are paid for as well.
So essentially, the solar's paying for your roofs.
Yeah, so
I was actually following all that too because I was anxious.
So after 18 years, your solar's paid for, you've gotten free roofs out of it, and between year 18 and however long your solar lasts, you're getting free power.
What if we were, just because you're the math guy here, what if we were to separate them back out, consider the solar on its own and the roof replacement on its own?
So,
Like,
yeah.
how many years till we break even on?
Yeah,
the-
great
just the
question.
solar?
So if you're gonna say, hey, look, we need to do these roofs anyway, right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna take those out of the conversation. Okay, so now you're up front on the solar project, drops down to the 2.1 million.
Yep.
So now you're looking at out of pocket, once the grants are backed out, the out of pocket is, the number there is 286,000. So at $80,000 a year in electrical costs that you're avoiding,
3.5.
you're looking at 3 or 4 years.
Oh.
I got out a calculator.
I was like, did you do that? I was like,
No, I was
3
listening.
and
I mean, I could have, but I just didn't.
Yeah, no.
That's how I always feel about
Now
it. 'cause I
again,
have to do it.
Now again, it's, I don't know that it's,
I was like, okay, close enough.
I don't know
It's
that
gotta be
it's
3.5.
accurate to do an assumption that you're going to avoid 100% of your electricity costs.
Right.
But, you know, it's probably 80 or 90%. So if it's, you know, so if your electric bills drop from $80,000 a year to 20, so then you're saving 60 grand a year. Well, if your investment is 300,000, at worst case scenario, you're looking at a 5-year
Yeah.
buyback.
Okay. Just a way to like think about it too.
So, I know it's a concern about like the program going away, but to get back to, I think what was Amanda's question originally, if like Blackstone's all set, we have no roof expenses, it's only the, you know, investment of 61,000, it's gonna bring it 100% offset for usage. We assume 3 to 4 years before that's a net even on itself. Like, would all of these numbers as far as these programs and stuff still be the same if we only did one building?
Well, didn't he break it down for us?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I'm asking though. Like, if you just took that first column,
Yeah.
like, could you take that independently
You
of
could
its
just
own
take
and
the
not
first
do?
column. Yeah. Yeah, you could take any of the columns on the list if you so chose. I think realistically, the ones like, if you waited 3 years, I don't think the SREX will definitely change. Smarter inverter rebate will probably go away, and the investment tax credit I think will go away for sure.
So what if we said today, oh yeah, this looks great, and we figured it out, and we were like, yeah, go forward. We still have the time frame of being able to redo all those roofs before we even get close. Like, would we be able to apply for the grant funding? Do we have to get all the roofs done and get the solar in? And then what happens if the grants are already changed or less? Like, is there a guarantee before we go into it that it's there still?
Before we would sign, yes. So I would want our SREC's application in so that we know for sure that we're locking in at this one I think was around $66 in SREC. So that we're locking that in. And if for some reason something's happened between now and when you guys decide to do this, if it drops to, just call it $50, I'd rerun the numbers and then you guys can decide, we just went from 3.5 to 5.5, is it worth it at that point? The investment tax credit is straightforward, and the smart inverter rebate, ComEd's doing some funky stuff right now with that, so if they did something strange, I would rerun the numbers and then you would know before you ever sign, because I'm not gonna give you a number that's not realistic of what you're expecting. I mean, I'm not gonna sign you up for 2.1 and you guys are expecting 1.8, and next thing you know, you're only getting 1.5. I'll present that information as far as where it stands on the day that you're signing the contract and where everything is standing.
If we were taking the whole package, would your recommendation still be to move forward sooner with Blackstone since it's ready to go?
I don't know if it's necessarily sooner, because the way that we would plan all this out is we would actually get the roofs done and be able to do the solar back to back. We would line it up that way.
I feel like he's.
Cause then
the
it's
cost.
a labor cost
Right.
that you're utilizing.
Yeah.
We gotta bring all this stuff here.
And did you say, this kind of still going along that, like, what would you recommend as far as like the longest we would wait on making a decision where some of these programs would be gone, like within a year or two or shorter than?
I would seriously consider it in your December board meeting.
Okay,
And I only say that because of the roof. And
okay,
getting that in line, that would be my recommendation.
I would think that with lead times, and with materials, that any projects that we're going to do next summer, that our December board meeting would be, the latest that we would want to approve those.
So the amount of money that it would take up front, 2.1 plus the 1 point, whatever that was, 3 or 5 or
Yeah, about 1.3, yeah.
Where does that come from?
So we can do a variety of things. We quite seriously can just pull it out of the bank, right? We have those reserves. One of the things that we had talked about is to not deplete our reserves, but to look at, if we decide between our solar and our other, secured entry and doorways and those kind of, between those projects, if we decide that we want to do $4 million in working cash bonds, we're to a point now in our bond repayment schedule that we would be able to tack those in, and we could do those things. So we wouldn't have to deplete our reserves.
That would be 100% of my recommendation, especially given the fact that was like the one area where, looking at what we have cash on hand, we don't want to take all of that away. If we were gonna do it, I think bonding makes sense. I mean, it's, never want to do it, but it's also like, these are the kind of projects that it's set up for, right? Like the structural, long-term investment.
Yep, 100%.
It fits those other things that we said we needed to get done.
I guess for a next step standpoint, it's a big decision. Not that we always get the best feedback, but this is, I think, one of those opportunities where some transparency and eliciting feedback from our stakeholders would be beneficial. So maybe writing up kind of a summary of this is current state, we're gonna have to do these roofs soon. We're already seeing some failure in some areas, so we know we have that's gonna be coming no matter what. These are the programs in place. Some of these are likely going away at some point in time. We believe it'd be a break even at this many years. I do think it's important to do that, and then to also summarize some of the security expenses. I can't imagine anyone being opposed to us even just catching up with what we should have been doing 10 years ago as far as secured entrances go, and having our doors meet, all of the codes and everything. But I do think it's an opportunity, especially if we talk about the bonding structure of it all. I mean, it's that's debt that's then the community's debt, right? I mean, that's
Yes.
signing them up for it. So I think kind of providing the opportunity for feedback, and if we talked about sending all the summary out and then encouraging people to utilize that November board meeting to
Are we having
express
to make a choice between
concerns.
A or B, or you're trying to think we can put it all in one?
It would be all in one, I think. If we went the bonding structure, that's why, because we would be bonding for the full amount to do security and roof and solar, right?
We could structure that however you wanted.
Well,
So-
I was gonna say, I
Yeah, I
think
was like,
maybe
why
what
does it have
she's
to be?
asking and what I think is that we could still choose just the secured
Oh,
entries.
yeah.
And not necessarily go
Oh,
down
yeah.
the solar, and they talked a little bit about the roof, you know, maybe having a few more years, maybe like it's past its expiration, but not like faulty at
Unsafe,
the current,
right.
moment, so. I
Do
don't
we have a
think we
total
to-
investment approximation
No,
of
it's
this
like-
package,
yeah,
like we
yeah,
do
no,
for this
yeah.
one?
I think we still have a choice.
Could we get
A
that
total
from
at the
you?
bottom?
Yeah, I didn't.
But it might be
Yeah, would you like me to do it real quick?
better to do.
It's okay if you don't have it right now, I think that's a number we'd wanna be able to include in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, if you, as you look at this kind of options chart, the two numbers are given because right now, with the preliminary work that they've done, they've kind of created a range, right? And so that's what the two numbers mean. They think that at this point in time, they would be able to provide, if we said, hey, do this, we think it's gonna be in this neighborhood.
So I think if we have that total and what does that security enhancement look like, you know, broken down by building, and then same thing with the solar thing, I just think it's an opportunity for us to put it, and maybe even in a simple click through presentation type thing that people can take a look at and see numbers and be real, and then invite them in for feedback, whether they can be at the meeting and or provide written feedback. I think it's a chance to hear from sides.
Mm-hmm.
Irregardless, I think, I mean, while it's important, in my opinion, to put out for feedback, in my opinion, I don't think the security thing is even a
That's impossible.
possible no. Like,
That's a yes.
we absolutely need, I mean, cause we're not even compliant in providing a safe environment for,
I think the only conversation, and I don't wanna be that kind of hurt about it. Lots of these, I mean, there's a lot of zeros here, so we need to make sure that we have all of the right conversations. But to me, when you look at kind of what's been presented, and if there is a conversation between haves or needs and wants, is whether or not to redesign the Northbrook office while you're doing this, right? And so I think all of the others, at the end of the day, those are all student staff security issues.
Or that outdoor space at Northbrook as being optional too,
like cleaning up the soft
to
lighting
revamp.
and
Well,
stuff.
I feel like that's minor, but like the seating and that
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Mhm.
like.
Right, so outside of those two things,
Right.
the
Needs
rest of
versus
it is
wants.
just, you
Yeah.
have to keep people safe.
Security package,
Yeah, you have to keep people safe.
Could you take a few minutes and go through this over the next week or so and kind of do what you just said? Like these numbers are the absolutes. We need to have closing and locking doors. We need to have secured entrances. And these are it makes sense to do it while we're doing it, because we're gonna need to, relay out this area or move this or whatever. Like, could we have those two numbers separated into the
Certainly.
needs and the wants?
Yep.
For the
Of course.
security project?
Now, you will notice that there's one thing we haven't even talked about tonight, right? And that's what we've been
Cameras.
talking about for 6 months, which is cameras.
Mm.
And so this is exactly the kind of partner that I think that you want to work with, right? Because GRP Wagon has had all their people in, they've done all of their bidding, they've done all of their vetting, they've had everything done out, and at the end of the day, they said, we can't do it any cheaper than what you've already bid it, and if you can do it cheaper somewhere else, go do it somewhere else. And that's what you want. We don't want people who are gonna bring us proposals that don't make sense financially. So I really appreciate their honesty on that.
And that's another piece to consider if we talked about bonding perspective.
Yep.
What was that number again? I feel like you
130.
gave it to us.
135 was our low number.
Okay, that's right.
And after seeing some of these numbers, all of a sudden doesn't sound so bad.
No, that's right.
But yes, I would love to pull that apart and make that report for all of you. It's been a pleasure.
And were there any other, I guess, grant or program type things in regards to security and safety for schools? Or I'm assuming that we looked at that, but.
We have looked and things pop up and don't, and if something pops up, we reply. I don't know what you're using your maintenance grant for, but you've got that under control for something, I'm sure already, cause.
It'll be for roofs.
Yeah.
I'll write that $50,000 grant for roofs as long as they want to put it out there.
Yeah, so there's a matching grant right now for 50,000, that, you can use, but it can be used for anything, so the roofs, but sometimes some security stuff comes up and we definitely apply, but there's nothing that we've presented in the numbers right now that we're waiting on or
Okay.
expecting.
Similarly with the roofs, especially with the roofs being necessary in order to support the solar, is there anything that helps subsidize or provide incentive to that 1.3 million in regards to the roofing?
Nothing on roofs, unfortunately,
Okay.
yeah.
Good. So we'll expect some more information from you.
Yes, ma'am.
And then we'll work together on something we can put out to the community to educate them. And then our next steps would be kind of entertaining some additional community-based conversation in November with a potential action item on anything by December. Does that sound fair?
And that meets GRP Wigman's timeline
Yeah,
as well.
that won't be a problem, and let us know anything you need for the presentation, the community presentation you're putting together.
Yeah, I think that would be
We can
great if you
adjust
could
any
work
layouts.
together and provide some of that, just kind of like what the higher level overview would be, and depending on what kind of feedback and or information, we hear going around, you may even wanna consider having you present at that November meeting
Yeah, if you
to
guys
the
need us to,
community, and then having that public comment after that.
that's no problem.
I really don't like spending time with Scott, but if this is what it takes to get the job done, then that's what it is.
He's speaking the truth, he'd prefer if it's just Alyssa, I would think. She's much nicer than I am, that's for sure too.
Well, we do really appreciate your honesty and feedback and investing the time, and we've already seen some great things, so.
Excellent. Yeah, no, you're, if I didn't say this last one, I'll say it again. Your group that you have that we worked with this summer, district-wide, principals, anybody who ran into your maintenance staff, they were great to work with all summer long. So it goes a long ways for a good project. So we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Have a great night.
Drive safely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your next friend.
All right.
Hard to meet friends like you.
Tyler or Dave, who wants to go next?
Go, Dave.
You want me to pull your presentation up?
I don't think so.
Okay.
So I am here this month to talk about the student incentive programs we have at Lincoln. And we just have 3 that we run by throughout the year. The 3 that we have is the REACH Award, which is a monthly award. Our trimester celebration, which in the name it's a trimester celebration. And then we have something that we're putting together and we're hoping to roll out here in the next week or 2 is called Lion Pride. The first one is the REACH Award, and that's been around forever. And looking at old records, it has to be decades old.
It's over 40, it was there when I was there.
Yeah, I've seen old pictures and records, and I'm like, I'm not going to be the guy that ends this thing. 'Cause it's kind of like the Lincoln Relays,
Oh,
the next
yeah.
person can, we're keeping this going. I'm not going to be the guy that ends it.
I used to
So,
be on the front yard.
yeah. So the REACH Award, essentially, like I said, it's a monthly award. It's kind of like, I'll call it the student of the month in the classroom. It's the teacher decides and the teacher chooses who is chosen. And so they'll send their names down to the office. We'll collect one from each of it's 16 students. It's from each classroom and from our cross-cat room. And so when I collect the names, and then I'll make the big announcement in the morning, and then they'll all come down, and I'll have these little certificates for them, and then they get to have a special lunch with me, and it's usually at sometime at the end of the month. And the lunch it's Marshallones, it's chips, it's pop, and it's usually some kind of a cookie that I try to persuade them that I spend all night trying to bake, you know, like a Chip Ahoy or a Oreo, and they don't buy it at all.
So the Reach Award, is that strictly academic, or is there a citizen
behavior,
component?
citizenship.
Okay.
That's what I tell the teachers to look for, you know, to focus on. But it can be academic if a child, when needed, but I really prefer it to be more so citizenship behavior, more of an incentive for the classroom.
Thank you.
And so they'll have lunch with me, and you know, I like to be the big clown in there. We play around, have fun conversations. If you've had a child that's had the Reach Award, you may have heard stories about me talking about my flying dragon, or I hope to someday to get a giraffe neck transplant, and they'll ask questions, and you know, we be silly and have a fun time. And like I said, they walk away with a certificate. We take a picture in the old gym, and they get a copy of that picture, and then the teachers will put it on their locker, and it gets displayed, and they usually, the teachers will take like a template that makes sure that it sticks out, that says if they were the Reach Award winner, and then I submit it to the Mendota Reporter to get a little extra press for it. And then the second celebration, that's our trimester celebration. And for students to qualify for that, they have to have less than 3 MIRs. And an MIR is just a fancy word for it's a minor incident report. It's just like a note, a teacher, you know, you get a note sent home from the teacher. So if they get less than 3, then they're eligible, or an ODR, which is an office referral. If they get one of those, then they're out, and they gotta set out with a staff member for that, during that celebration.
Can they earn it back?
Yeah.
No, they don't get their earnings back.
But it resets every trimester.
Yes, it does reset every trimester, yes. And so celebrations are determined by our Pride Committee at the beginning of the year, and then this year, you know, trimester 1, it's a recess, extra recess with me. Trimester 2, we'll have bouncy houses, and then trimester 3, we take them bowling at the Elks Club. And they have a good time. And then the last one.
Is it always the same kids that miss out on those?
What's that?
Is it always the same kids that miss out on those?
No, not necessarily. Not that
How
I've
many do you
noticed.
normally have not participating in those?
Very few, honestly. I would say it's never a full classroom. If we have to use a classroom, it's very surprising. It's so few that they sit out on the bench outside the office.
So a dozen or less for the whole building?
Half a dozen. It's.
And you're not seeing that it's those like same 6 kids trimester after trimester that are being pulled?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
No. I would say throughout the whole school year, every child goes to 1.
Okay.
Every child makes 1. And then finally, the Lion Pride is the last one, and that's something that has popped up this year. We noticed that we needed to get something a little bit extra. The kids need a little bit more reinforcement, especially in areas like, you know, with the specials and the lunchroom. So we came up with, it's kind of like a PBIS kind of a model where all the staff members are going to be involved. They're going to have tickets, and so if the class does well at lunch, then, you know, we're gonna give the class a couple tickets or the teacher a couple tickets to take back, and that'll go into their bucket. And then after they collect so many, which we set the number at 100, then they'll have a mini classroom celebration. And that could be, you know, if they want to come in wearing pajamas, or if they wanted to show a cartoon, or if they want to have a movie or a popcorn party, or I told they could be creative and do something else, then they'll have that, and those can be unlimited. And then there's a sign outside the main office with 3 lion heads, and once, say, Holly's class, they get their celebration, she could write what their celebration was. That way, when students, staff, whoever walk by, they can look and see what each class, who's earned one and what they did for their celebration. And the thought behind that is hopefully some kids or the teachers will make recognition of it to get the
Motivate
kids
everybody
motivated.
else.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
there-
look at
Is
Holly's
it the
class.
teacher's
So there's-
responsibility to come up with the idea and put on the program?
I'm sorry?
So if it's Holly's class, is Holly responsible to like organize it, set up the party, or what, the celebration?
Yeah, but we told them to keep it very minimal, but keep it fun, keep it something that they want to do within. We're not going to go out and have, you know, I don't expect Holly to go get bouncy houses and go out and just have this.
Well,
big
just
whole-
like some teachers
I
are
know.
into that stuff
Yeah.
and some aren't, and so
Hey, I'd love
He
it.
said like wearing pajamas just
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
day, like that
Okay.
would be a simple thing.
And we also
I
have
guess.
pride funds that I
extra
said, you know, if
recess.
it's something
a
that we're
little
not gonna,
something extra you can.
we
Okay.
can chip towards it too, just to
So, okay,
make
so
it
I have a
fresh.
question real quick. So there's nothing that every child, like when you say PBIS, or like kind of like a PBIS, which goes back to the strategic, our goals, there's nothing that every kid, even if they get those 3, gets, that everybody gets.
I think
So,
that's what this is.
You know, what I mean? Well, no, because he said that if they get those 3, then there's no really school-wide celebration. When you're talking PBS, you know,
I
like
just
I
use it
said-
because of the tickets.
No, I understand, but I'm saying, so there's like, if I get 3 ODRs or whatever, there's nothing that the whole, like grade level or whatever participate in.
Well, they would no one's excluded from the class Lion Pride celebration.
Well, but only if they get those 100.
They have to earn the
But
ticket.
every
Every kid
class in
the
a
class.
year would hit at least
Oh.
one.
I would
but
think you would get
multiple.
multiple.
Yeah, so there won't be a time when a class
Doesn't
wouldn't
get to.
have.
Yeah, I'm just surprised that that's not like trimester-wise. You know what I mean?
But
Probably.
this is the first time we're rolling into this,
Okay.
so we're open to
So we really
suggestions,
don't
too.
know how many kids have missed out on that because it's something new.
Correct.
Okay,
We're looking to roll this out
okay,
in about a week or so.
okay.
So it'll
So-
be by class, so no one will be excluded. So this actually is kind of the opposite of the other one where we were saying, well, who's excluded? Because in this case, even if do have, MIRs and your class earns a party, you're still in the party,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
you're not excluded for that behavior at all.
And really, if your class is getting all these little tickets, maybe some of those students who are missing out on the trimester celebration with the ODRs and MIRs, maybe that would prevent them from getting those ODRs and MIRs as well. That might be a little preventative medicine for some. And that was the intention too, because like I said, we've been seeing some upticks in, cafeteria, hallways, bathrooms.
My kid said that.
Specials.
That they've been getting yelled at, not them
So
personally.
we're
although
looking
I'm
to
sure
just.
they have, but that was, they're like, but Mom, that's where we get to see our friends and talk, and they always yell at us and don't let us have fun with our friends at lunch, so that kind of I guess I'll say bothered me, like that is their little bit of free time to interact, and then they get told.
Yeah, we want them to have fun, but it just, let's
Expectations.
bring the roar down a little
You
bit.
let them loose and whoosh, I get it,
Expectations.
but
Yeah, I get it.
they've been
Amanda
saying that the
volunteering
last.
to watch the cafeteria.
Yeah, well, she's
I'm in.
While you're on leave.
I'm right in, take that baby, it'll be quiet, I'm sure.
We'll make competitive tickets for
I'll give them all out to everybody.
I do like that you have like the reach, which is really, I mean, not everyone's gonna get that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
very small, it's very special, like, so that is great to me. And then you've got the trimester, which is like the whole school celebrating as long as you didn't have, and three MIRs is a decent amount, like in one trimester. I mean, it's not like it's easily taken away from you. And the Lion Pride really kind of celebrating as a class. So I kind of like that there's like tiers of individual achievement, you know, meeting expectations, but not necessarily having to go above and beyond, and then being as a unit where you get to celebrate together. To me, it kind of covered multiple tiers within that.
So I feel like
concept.
9 MIRs, like to make you
We had
miss
some
all
things going
3
on.
of the trimester
There's
celebration.
probably lots of other issues happening at that
Then
point.
that's, yeah.
Right? I mean,
I
there's,
mean,
hopefully there's other things that go along with it besides just taking away the
right,
you. Yeah.
trimester. If somebody's in
yeah.
getting that many MIRs.
Other supports.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you
Okay.
for
Any other
explaining all that.
questions?
Sounds good.
It's exciting.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Dave. Yeah, there's cookies.
Thank you.
How's it going, everybody?
How are you?
It's cookie time.
Hold on, Tyler, we need a cookie.
Hang on.
No problem.
Tyler's got data, we need cookies.
More numbers.
It's been a number night, hasn't it?
I was like, I just want Tyler's rest.
All right. So I want to talk about two things. One, we'll talk about fast-paced data here in a second. The other thing dealing with curriculum is yesterday, our half day, we used it for vertical integration, or integration, articulation, if I can speak correctly. And we kind of call it colloquially 90 up, 90 down, where each grade level is going to spend 90 minutes with the grade below them, then 90 minutes with the grade above them. And part of that is also, we go over to the high school, we sent this year, we sent 7th and 8th grade over to the high school, kind of a little more collaboration. And some of that is just to more round out the picture in conversation with the high school. But it also balances the numbers a little bit because they have a lot of team members that deal with freshmen where we have one 8th grade science teacher and they have 3. You know, so just a little bit of balance in there. That started last year when Brad came in, conversation between him and Jeff at the high school. We started meeting monthly. Myself, Paula, and Brad, and Jeff and Denise at the high school. And some really great things have come out of that. And part of this is our articulation. We're going to try to continue to build these bonds and bridges. We say it all the time in our meetings. It's hard because we are 2 different districts with 2 different boards and personalities because grade levels are different personalities. But we're really trying to build those bridges because at the end of the day, they're all our Mendota kids, and and it's one of those things we have to build that. I'll be happy to share information. One of the things is we give all the teachers relevant questions as kind of the backbone to be looking at when they're meeting and discussing, ranging from like, what are you doing specifically for homework or test retakes, or what issues are you having with writing right now? Because obviously we're writing and reading across the curriculum, and so as we're looking at those things, so some of the questions are just there. Spark, and obviously, anytime you get in a room with other educators, other things come up, so they take notes, they share them back to us, and we'll be unpacking those at the next few admin meetings and move forward. But be happy to share information as we go through that. But the other thing I wanted to talk about here is FastBridge. FastBridge is our benchmarking program. It came in about 5 years ago, my first year in the district as assistant principal. But maybe you've heard of MAPS or Ames Web or NWA, DIBBLES, and this is the version we use. We really like it because not only does it benchmark our kids, which we do 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring, which basically places us and shows us where the kids are performing in kind of general snapshots, which helps us as we prepare for things like IAR for the higher grades. But it gives us an idea of what the strengths and weaknesses are, but it also gives us a progress monitoring tool. So we use it as well as, to weekly track. We look at the data, go, these are the kids who we call them tier 3 and tier 2 kids. who are the highest need. And we can then place them in a program, weekly, we're gonna do interventions with them. So for example, whether it's Win Time, which is now being rolled out between Blackstone and Lincoln, which stands for What I Need. And really it's for reading, and it gives the kids who are the lowest of low extra intensive help. We overload, they're gonna have extra pairs in the room, so it's smallest group possible to give them that extra help. So that's intervention. Whether it's a program we're gonna use, whether we're using IXL for math and ELA this year, that's new. So we're basically trying to meet them, and then we monitor them every week and go, are they showing gains? Are they heading in the right direction? And we always talk about it's supposed to be 6 data points that gives you an idea, are you heading in the right direction? And if it's not, then it becomes that conversation again. Okay, are we missing something? Is there something else going on? If the kid's been absent 2 days a week for those 6 weeks, that's a problem. That could definitely be impacting the performance. It could be different things we're looking at. So but that also helps us in a big picture as we start to have conversations about, are there kids who maybe need to be referred for IEPs? So some of that is, again, data points we can use to help us round out the big picture. And as an admin team, one of the big things we look at is, as you look at all test scores, is how are we doing? Are we heading in the right direction, right? And the last 3 years or so with COVID and all that has been not the greatest. And we call it the COVID window. Test scores went down. Everybody was worried about other things. Obviously for IAR tests, even FastBridge, we didn't test all the normal stuff because it became COVID. Then it became, well, we just have to get through the day. And for a while there, if you remember, we were on A-Day, B-Day schedule a couple of years ago. That seems a lifetime ago. So we've had a lot of kids kind of go through that. And so we need to see, and we're just having a conversation about today as we were meeting, like the teachers need to know that too. Like, look, we know they're not where we want them to be yet. It was a reset. We dropped down. Everybody dropped down, but we're making the gains. We're closing those gaps. We're heading in the right direction. So this is just a little information kind of snapshot. The top part there is going to be the K1. There's a lot of different tests within FastBridge, but the main ones we look at for K1 would be early math and early reading. And I'm not going to bore you with all the details of which one. It gives you a little idea of what they're looking at. And so when we look at that, so like for example, you look at the early math for grade 1 because they don't test that until in the spring for kindergarten because they can't really read. So trying to test them is going to be really problematic for that part for the earliest. They don't test it later. But you look at from fall of last year to fall of this year is a 14% bump in score. And what that actually is, that doesn't mean like, oh, first grade last year scored this, and like it's just the overall picture. But that is huge, and that's what we actually would expect though when you're looking at what groups can show the quickest gains. Well, it's the ones just learning it, right? They're going from nothing to something. So that's kind of a big deal there. The reading, that's one of the things that we are really loving about our WIN program. We know, Stacey kind of brought it in at Blackstone. We know that we're still tweaking it and making improvements to it because it's still new. But we are seeing those dividends pay off, where kids are performing better at reading. And so when you're talking about, I put the category, it's low risk / college pathway. That basically, the most simplest terms are, those are the kids that we're not overly worried about. They're on our radar. Obviously, we need to be aware of all kids. We want all kids continue to grow no matter where you're at. But those are the kids, those are the groups we want. If we were talking about IAR scores, you'd say those are meets and exceeds. Those are the groups we're looking at there. So, the fact that, in both those categories, over half the kids are there, that's awesome. And over the years, we expect that to continue to grow a little bit as well as we get more familiar into the programming. As the kids coming in will hopefully have no recollection of what the COVID era was. Because one of the things that is in here, we talk about academics, but social and emotional is a big part of that too. And so some of these kids coming in, didn't have socialization like they normally would have when they were 3. Maybe they didn't go to preschool because their parents were worried, whether that's here, Head Start, wherever. So again, we're dealing with a lot of those things. And that is something that's not here, and it's not the data we talk about, really with you guys, but we do have a social emotional tool through FastBridge as well called Sabres, which helps us track, like, are there issues going on? You know, the early grades, teachers administer it with the kid, and then the higher grades, kids self-administer, like in junior high, which our SEL team uses to kind of like, are there things on the radar that we didn't know that you were dealing with? Because not every kid talks about it. But then at the bottom, you know, grades 2 through 8, we use A reading, A math. That is the best snapshot of your overall math and reading ability. And again, you can see that, you know, we're heading in the right direction. We went up 4% in math, we went up 3% in reading. And across every category, we did reduce the kids who were at the highest risk. So we didn't see any raise in high risk categories, which is awesome. That means, again, we're getting people back in the right direction. One of the things we kind of joke about, we say it all the time in our admin meetings, the best intervention for kids is being at school 7 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Yep.
Doesn't matter if we're bringing back the after school program, which is awesome, gonna help more kids. Just being here. Yeah, I'm sure if you guys if you have kids, like they've been sick for a few days, getting back on that rhythm is hard. And so just being here, you know, you being part of a lesson, being part of activities, that makes all the difference. And again, our data is showing us we're doing the right thing. And one of the conversations, again, we had a little district meeting today. We don't have a name for the committee yet. But one of the conversations we're having is like, we need to make sure that teachers know that we are headed in the right direction. And it's because of them. The hard work, like, it has been hard for everybody. And I know this year's normal-ish. But, you know, they're working incredibly hard, and that they need to know, like, we are doing what we need to be doing. We are closing those gaps. And I think it's hard because they think they know where they're supposed to be because they've taught this for years. Well, the world's different, and we're going to get back to that. But we're going to continue to make those gains, continue to make that progress, continue to work. And so every year the kids get a little bit better, and, you know, again, our data is showing that that's what's happening. And so, again, everybody either loves data or hates data. So it's my job to help explain data. Are there any questions? Anything I can clarify?
Tyler, when you talk about like grade 1 and 2021 was 51 and 2022 is 52, that's two different sets of kids.
Yes.
Right?
Only because in grade 1 they don't have a kindergarten fall score because they don't do that. So that's it's the only thing comparing year to year. But and I shared with Brad and the admin team when you looked at data, because again, there's 100 ways to look at data and how you will look at it. The way I like to look at data is, so our current 8th grade group. So when I don't want to look at this 8th grade group versus last year's 8th grade group. I want to look at the 8th graders this year. What was their 7th grade score? What was their 6th grade score? Right. And what's nice is, because we have been in FastBridge for 5 years, we do have 5 years of data with a little bit of a gap there because of COVID for those. So we can kind of map those out. And across the board, 7th grade has been our toughest group. We've had a lot of move-ins. It's our small group. About 30% have IEPs, 30% are EL, which generally historically do not test as well, which is something we're looking at as well. That's probably the only group that hasn't shown all the gains we want to see. They kind of been up and down. But we can look back at the FastBridge data, which is interesting in this group, is they were heading up, and then literally one FastBridge data point dropped from like a 50 to a 19. And you go, that makes no sense. And this conversation too is, I love data, but at the end of the day, I can't guarantee when you take a test that you're trying, that you buy in. And so it's one of those things that it's an important data point, but it's never going to be the be-all, end-all. It gives us a great snapshot to have those conversations, to go further into detail with teachers and our interventionists and our admin team, and kind of go, okay, what are we seeing? You know, that's part of the reason when we do things like the IIR, it's kind of cheerleading, like, hey, it's a test. You know, kids view that a little differently when you know it's a standalone kind of thing. And so FastBridge, it's sometimes hard to make sure people like, hey, this does matter. And the younger kids tend to get it and buy in a little easier than the older kids, go figure. You know, they're like, oh, another test, okay. But we are seeing some of those, you know, kind of conversations and challenges happening. But
So are you able to, because I like data too, can you pull, like, for example, what this year's 3rd grade scored in 1st grade? Or, you know what I mean, so that we can see, because yeah, it's good to see 2nd through 8, but we all know that 2nd graders and 8th graders, you know what I mean? And I kind of even
No, I
want
hear
to say that it would also be nice to even look at like not only the grade, but also in the difference in the buildings.
Yeah, that's no
You know what I
problem. No,
mean?
yeah, I can definitely share that data. We have some of that already. We've talked a little bit in the admin team, kind of trying to visualize. One of the hard things is, like, if I'm looking at current third graders, going back 2 years because the problem is it's technically a different test, because you switch over to the early reading, early math.
Yeah, no, I'm
So,
saying
and they don't
even
realize
last
it's
year's.
kind of apples, oranges, it's still a snapshot, but not. But like, yeah, so like, again, like eighth graders, we have the longitudinal data to go back 5 years.
Yeah.
Even with IAR, we have that data to go back about 5 years as well. Maybe 6. But again, like there's you're seeing like they're kind of the normal kind of like this, and then there's a gap because they didn't test. And then when they came out of that gap, what happened? Well, scores are back down here now instead of here. And it's one of those things that I think, like I said, we're on the right track, making the gains. It's a slog though. It's going to be one of those things that.
What are your thoughts of why, obviously myself being an EL classroom teacher, why, yes, we know that they don't teach or they don't test as well. What are your thoughts on that, and what can we do to make sure that
Yeah, no, so I mean, and it's not a local thing, that's a national thing. I remember in the middle of COVID when they put out the data, like, well, EL students are testing lower than they were before. And I think part of it is that language barrier.
Yeah.
Even, obviously, I'm not sure everybody's familiar. If you're in our EL programming, whether you're in bilingual, the earlier grades, or just an ESL student older, you're most likely taking the access test, which will be usually January, February, which is basically showing your English acquisition skills. And you are officially in our programming until you score high enough on that to exit out of the program. And so part of it's gonna be that barriers, and because like IAR, that's gonna be in English. That's the big state test, that's gonna be in English. And that's part of making it more of a norm, so you can compare, across the board, but that's a barrier. Some of it is gonna be, I think, just familiarization with the style of testing, because access testing, which they're gonna be familiar with very much, because they've been testing that since kindergarten, it doesn't look the same as IAR, it doesn't look the same as FastBridge. And again, FastBridge it's not meant to freak people out, it's meant to give you an idea of what, online testing looks like, which is the big thing these days.
But there is a Spanish version.
In the earlier grades for FastBridge, there are some Spanish versions. Like there's an early reading Spanish, so that like Petra in second grade or Becky and Elizabeth over at K1 bilingual could use that. But even then, like one of the biggest things that we're seeing here, and it's kind of, I think, just kind of changed. I'm not sure I can't speak nationally, but we're seeing more and more students who are entering our bilingual program not being truly advanced in Spanish to begin with. So like Spanish is spoken in the home, but they're coming in a lot more profound in English, but Spanish is still a nature of it. So like some of it's they're learning Spanish, so that I think creates the barriers, and we have to legally do that based off home language surveys and how but that's that challenge, and that's one of the things that Lauren Merkins, who helps run the ESL program, especially through here at Northbrook, we continue to have these conversations. We continue to look at that data. We're breaking down last year's IAR data. One of the things one of the new things on the state report card coming out next week is the diversity, equity continuum. And so it basically is going to give us ratings of, so are we doing a good job or not when it comes to equity for different subgroups. And I can't talk about the data yet, we're under embargo until next week. But that's going to be one of the things that we're going to be looking at through ESL teams, through admin teams, I'm sure, through the bilingual team. Because we know that's an underserved population. And it's one of those things that...
half of our student population is Hispanic, correct?
Hispanic, I don't know.
I was like, just because you're
but
Hispanic,
part
that
of,
doesn't
yeah,
mean you're telling
part of the
everyone.
part of the EL
but I
program.
just don't
I'm just saying.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm saying we're basing
About-
all this testing off of
Yeah.
something that a fair population
Yeah.
amount can.
About
be
26,
successful
27% of our
at.
district is EL, English learning.
Okay.
And again, that could be, again, very high functioning. You would never notice it unless you were seeing it on a test or in a classroom. So there's a huge range of ability, just like in anything else. And but then again, we also, one of the challenges too is, and again, it's something we're looking at internally, as kids go through, if you are double labeled, so if you have an IEP and your ESL or EL, that's a challenge in and of itself.
Yeah, because IEPs trumps ELs.
Yeah. And then it
Takes
becomes,
forever to get.
especially if in the earlier grades when we have bilingual teaching, it becomes that conversation of going like, okay, what do we do here? Like, how do we best serve the kid? Because that at the end of the day is everybody's goals. How do we best serve this kid? We don't want them to be harmed. We don't want to have them have less opportunities, less resources. And again, it all just piles into one another. And it's not easy. It's never going to be a clean, easy conversation.
And at that early age, you don't know if you truly know that if it's actually an IEP issue or if it's a language issue.
Well, and that's, again, we have data days and we go, every building after we have FastBridge and everybody's done, we have data dig days and we organize and we figure out which tier are you going to be, who's getting interventions, where do we need to go. And then as we collect data, that becomes, conversations with the teachers, with our school psych, with our special ed department. Are there kids we need to refer to special ed, or is the data showing there's issues? But again, part of it, again, coming out of COVID, there was less data. But then you start going like, okay, well, they were here, or they were remote the whole time for COVID. Well, they didn't get 5 days a week, 7 hours a day. Or, they look at, again, the kid's absent a lot. Okay, that could be 100 reasons why, but that's going to impact their education. So you're trying to figure out, like, is it an ability? Is it just they're not here, so they're not getting the information? And again, that's never going to be an easy conversation. And I know it's something that our special ed department and school psych don't take lightly, and really try to make sure that we're providing the kids the resources they need, and the testing, and it's an ongoing process.
In the last couple of years, we've tried to really do the best job possible that we can, supporting our kids as they kind of recover and regain some of this learning loss. Whether it's re-examining our RTI MTSS program and the interventions that we use, adding additional supports, whether it's re-examining what different programs look like, adding different programs like the after-school program. We've really done a lot of things to try to support our kids. And this data set is a reaffirmation that keep doing what you're doing. You're headed in the right direction. Kids are recovering. They're making gains, and so it is. And Tyler hit it right on the head. We have a tremendous staff. Our teachers are doing great things with our kids, and so this is really good data that says keep doing what you're doing, keep on it, keep moving forward. And so
does FastBridge, I know IAR's your big one, but does FastBridge give you any sort of feeling for comparison's sake with any other schools, kind of like where anybody else is at? Share that?
Well, maybe we can't see what's LaSalle doing. Or
no, but just
there's
aggregate.
So between benchmarks, we use the benchmarks internally to kind of place people, and then there's the national norms. And so when we look at placing kids into intervention groups, we look at the national norms. We look at these are the kids who are the bottom 10% nationally, and so we're going to be able to place them and look at those, and those are kids the highest need, and then we tier them. Then you're looking at 11 through 25%, and then.
And are we looking? I know we all went through the same learning loss, that term, but are we looking about where everybody else is looking at this point as far as that?
Other districts?
Really, we'd be able to get that data more from IAR.
Yeah, I know
than
from
FastBridge.
But with that, the school report cards go live, I think October 27th. And that's going to be the first, because last year they basically, if you looked at any of the school report cards, they're just like, haha, shenanigans.
Right.
There just wasn't, because they didn't collect it because it was COVID, and they're like, any data we gave was going to be corrupted and not valid. And so this is the first year we're kind of back on that path. And so that's one of those things. I know Beth, if you didn't know Beth before, she was curriculum director before me, would again go in and look at that and compare us to, again, schools of comparable sizes, schools of comparable demographics, and I plan to do the same thing once that data becomes publicly available. Right now, we can only see our data,
right.
And again, you can't talk about it publicly.
So with FastBridge, the thing that you can do is those numbers that our average in math at 45 and our average in reading at 49. That's a nationally normed test. And so if we were to be, and again, a lot of this is pre-COVID national norms, right? And so that number to hit the average national norm should be 60. Okay, so you can see that we were in math, we were 41, we were 45. Kind of our target would be 60 on that. That would be kind of at the national norm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer. I know whether it happens this year, next year, I think we're going to be on par, if not, we're probably a little ahead of other districts in the area. But that's where we were before COVID, and we a few teachers have left the retirement stuff, but we had the same quality staff for the most part. And again, I know kids have to get back on track too, but I think we're gonna get there. And it's one of those things that, if you remember before, COVID, other districts were calling us, going like, "What are you guys doing?" And well, it's because we have quality staff, quality curriculum. We reinforce that. You can't teach the test. I think that's the most foolish thing. We teach the standards, which is what the test is created from. So we focus on what you're supposed to be looking at. Now, do you practice skills that are going to be on tests? For sure, but you don't go, hey, we're going to worry about that. Because if we focus on one test that's happened in the spring, we're doing everybody a disservice. And that's not our focus. It's going to be, again, quality education, and then the scores are going to come with that, which is what I think we'll see.
I have two questions.
Yes.
The first one is kind of in relation to what you were talking about, the quality staff and everything, and the teachers being used to, like you said, teaching whatever to this grade level for so many years. Do you feel like we have enough younger or newer to our building, or maybe even new to that grade teachers, that they're able to like not be in that, I guess, I don't want to say the word rut, but like in that mode of like thinking this is where it has to be, and able to be flexible in like the content, and all the teachers are really great. I'm not like saying,
yeah.
Okay, yeah. But
No, yeah.
Does that help, or do you think?
I think there's always going to be the ebb and flow. If I don't care what job you're in, you have people who come in every day going 150 miles an hour, and you see that teachers. I don't think we have any teachers who aren't giving 100%. I think sometimes when you have younger teachers or just new to the career, it gives a different energy to the team, which then you have the veteran teachers who get to share their knowledge, skill sets. Then you also get a lot of great new ideas, because again, I think about, like, I came out, this is my 18th year. How they're teaching you to be prepared to be a teacher is different than it was, in 2004 when I graduated. It just is. And so I think there's some great things and exchanges happening. And it's one of those things that I personally think it's amazing that we have teachers. It's not always easy, and that's what articulation means. They're not easy conversations. We tell the teachers, and we have these conversations, like, understand that at the end of the day, it's about the students and how we help them. And it's hard when if you're in first grade and you're talking to second grade, it's hard to hear a second grade go, well, they don't have this skill here, and not take that personally as a first grade teacher, or whatever grade, right? We go to high school, it's hard not to take that personally. But they're all we're meeting the kids where they're at. And that's been the biggest thing in kind of conversation is we have to give ourselves permission to meet the kids where they're at. Because you still have the kids who came in and they're up here. But we stretched that classroom instead of just having, most of the kids are in that middle of the bell curve. We have more in the lower end coming in, and again, we're closing those gaps, and in some cases we're closing them really quickly.
That's good.
And it's one of those things, again, they're back at school. Yep. That's the biggest thing. That's why, again, we have data for spring. I can show it, but what do we see every spring to fall? It's a dip in your score from spring to fall the next year. Well, it's that summer learning loss. That's not every kid, obviously. Some kids were living at the library this summer, which is awesome. They do some great programming.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't meaning that in
No,
any offensive way. I was just curious if that helped, with.
I think it's one of those things, and again, I've been here 3 years before Brad came into the role. New blood gives new ideas, and sometimes it's a new focus, new direction. But again, nothing else. It's a conversation.
Right.
This is my second year in a row. I'm part of the bilingual, and we were at the bilingual team. I want to hear ideas. Now, it may not always go with those things, but if we're not having the conversation, we're not doing ourselves or anybody else a favor.
Right.
You know, and sometimes it's hard conversations, and it's not personal. It's just like, this is what I'm struggling with, or this is what I'm seeing. What can we do about this? And again, you may have an idea, or you may have an idea, and
Right.
that's what quality team building is. That's why it's great that we have teams. And that's part of the reason we also, again, I think it's where we're meeting with the high school is because again, they're seeing our kids older, so they're going, well, it'd be great if you had this skill. And we're like, okay, so we can beg them, you know, in exchange and, you know, try to find ways where we're borrowing some of their ideas, and they're also maybe adopting some of the things that we're doing that are successful, and that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
Can't be an island.
Right. And then you mentioned a little bit about the WIN program, and you said maybe, I think that it was started at Blackstone?
Started last year, yeah.
Okay.
And it's based on a book, Win Time. It just means what I need. And it's basically just students centered around your biggest issues. And so we
what
think.
does that look like then, like
Yeah.
at maybe Lincoln or?
Well, and so yeah, Lincoln it just rolled out this year, so we don't have a lot of information yet there exactly how it's succeeding or not. We don't have the data yet. They rolled it out, and then obviously Fastbridge, and we've only been out of Fastbridge for about a month now, so we haven't done another benchmark to see how it's really going. But so like the way it works is, you know, again, reading is the focus because you read across the curriculum. It's the backbone. You have to be able to read to be able to succeed. I didn't mean to make that right. And so what happens is you look at their kids and use Fastbridge data and stuff like that, and you can, okay, these are your highest of your highs. And we tier them all the way down to the lowest of the lows. And it doesn't mean that they're not a quality student or quality kid. It just means in reading ability, we stratify. And so if you're in the highest, you're basically in the extension group. You're doing things and activities that are extending your abilities because you've already mastered that particular content or skill. And so then, you know, we place them with teachers, and as you get to the lowest group, you're going to have more teachers in the room, more paras. And so instead of having one teacher for maybe 10 or 12 kids, you're going to have 3-4 adults for 8, 9, 10 kids. Because we know the smaller the group, the more individual focus and attention you can give them, the more likely that they'll be able to retain that information. And so the teachers, you know, kind of with Stacy's help over at Blackstone and with Dave's help over at Lincoln, you know, kind of picked who's going to be taking this group. And it's important for us that we rotate who takes I'm going to say the generally the lowest group because that's rewarding, but it's also its own challenge, and we don't want people to burn out on this. You know, and so it's one of those things but they work together and they figure out like, okay, this is what we're going to do. So providing more intensive intervention, because that's always going to be a hard thing is making sure you get true quality focus time. You know, because that's something that we started switching a couple of years ago, and we noticed some of the issues with just across the district of, okay, we'd break out and we're going to, you know, teachers always like, this reading group's at the table and this one's with the pair over in the corner. And the conversation we're having is whatever group has the greatest need in that classroom is where the teacher needs to be, not the para. We have amazing paras, some truly amazing paras. Some are working on a path to become teachers themselves. But the most highly qualified person should be with the kids who are struggling the most. And that's kind of a re-envisioning of what we've been doing, and then the Win Time's kind of a logical extension of that. And so like I said, we've seen some really great gains at Blackstone and continue to grow and tweak that, rolling out to Lincoln. And so as the data comes in, especially we get to our winter benchmark, which will be in January, I think we'll have more idea as how that's rolling and do we need to make changes there. Because that's always the thing too, just because it's successful here doesn't mean you can just blanket roll it out. Sometimes you know, get different ages, different demographics, different teachers, right, and how they, you know, interact. And so,
Is it a daily time or
yes.
is it okay,
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, every day. Well, and it's one of those things, and one of the advantages of the lower grades is you can work in, you know, time for math and reading intervention. As you get to junior high, you pick whatever the greatest need is. If the kid is really low in math, we're going to give them math intervention. If they're really low in reading, again, just depends on where they're at. But that's something different. We rolled out a full period intervention this year at Northbrook. So instead of getting like 25 minutes here, 30 minutes there, it's a full 41 minute, I think their periods are.
So is it strictly based off the test scores, or is it like teacher referrals or classroom, like, because I feel like then you're taking one day.
No, yeah. So especially early in the year, it's going to be benchmark. It's going to be right at the test. Because even if you are the best, most high quality teacher, you don't have a lot to go off of in
Yeah.
September. We have to place them. But the most important thing with all our tier groups is the ability to move.
Mhm.
And so when we start with our tier 3, those are the highest need. We're going to go right through that list first and start looking at like who's special ed, because they're already getting high quality interventions and supports. So you're going to find the neediest kids, and then we're going to work on them. And then we find, again, especially in second grade, when they're just really acquiring so many skills, that a lot of those kids who start out in the lowest groups move up pretty quickly. And again, that's why we collect those Proctor's Learning data every week, which is basically to go on and fast version take a test, and it's checking their skills. Are you closing those gaps? And so yeah, the whole thing has to be fluid. And we find that a lot of the kids move out, and those who tend to stay lower, we're seeing that in their classroom work. And so it's reinforcing, kind of going, well, this makes sense because I'm seeing it here, and I have this data point. And the biggest part of that, through our MTSS, multi-tiered system of support, which is a little bit more all-encompassing than just RTI, is to then, if we need to take that data to our special ed and our school psych for referrals, and make sure that if there is a greater need, that we are addressing that. And that's one of those things that I think we're really appreciating too, is we're having built in time now, we're having those conversations with the teachers of like, which kids, maybe they're not in these tiers here, which kids are on your radar? That you're seeing there's issues and maybe a disconnect. Because sometimes you're going to have a kid who're like, man, my classroom, they're down here, but I see his FAFSA score, I don't know what happened. It's off the charts. That happens, but then that's a conversation. Did they guess their way through? That's a possibility. It really is. I mean,
Well, because I just feel like that sometimes those tier 2s that oh okay, but in the classroom they're
Well, one of the best things we did last year for the first time, if you were a teacher in 3rd grade, you used to be able to you could see your 20 kids. That's all you could see. We switched it so you can see grade wide. So, and again, they obviously it's privacy, to share those scores on the outside of the team. But I think it gave teachers a very much better perspective. And then like, man, I have kids who are struggling. And then like, if you see the other kids' scores, maybe there's some kids who are struggling, but these other kids are way down here. And again, for 100 different reasons. And so I think it gave a much more a big picture to it. That again, we're gonna reach out to all the kids, but we only have so many interventionists and so much time in the day, and to truly be interventions, it needs to be small group. If you have 12 kids in a small group, that's not a small group. And so we work, and that's probably the hardest part once you get those things up is finding the times, make sure everybody's getting the quality intervention time. We have some amazing interventions in this district who do really, really great work. And part of that's looking at the data, but also it's working with the teachers, working with the kids to find time, moving those kids in and out. And again, whether they have IEPs, whether they have EL backgrounds,
But I feel like it's good too with a little bit of change of scenery with students and teachers and even different classrooms, like for them to move around daily.
Yeah, well, and it's one of those things that, I came from a high school background, and then obviously I was over here at the junior high, and so I'm just used to kids move around. That's what they do, period to period to period. But again, it's no different than I think, whether you call it specials, exploratories over here, whatever, electives, whatever term you want to use for them. Like, it's great when you get out, and but it's even better when you get around other kids. And that's something that eventually when they get to 6th grade is going to happen, just a matter of fact. So the earlier they can get a little taste of that, because I don't care how much you like the 20 kids in your classroom, it's also kind of nice to be away from them sometimes. Just like if you have siblings, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah,
Thank you
I
for
think
explaining that.
No, absolutely, and that's one of those things
really
that
sounded cool. So.
No, I mean this very sincerely. If you have questions, again, I can share with the board the longitudinal data, and we're talking about like, hey, what did this 8th grade group do last year? So I can share that with you guys. That's not a problem. But again, anytime you want to have a conversation, I'm more than happy to do what I can to answer or try to find the data. And
just want to piggyback a couple of pieces off of what Tyler was saying. He talked about our 90 up, 90 down. That was yesterday. We did that last year, and there were a couple of instances where some of the conversations didn't go as smoothly, and I felt this year everybody kind of knew what to expect. They kind of really approached it in the right way and got really good feedback on that. And then to also to reiterate, I haven't talked to I haven't talked to anybody on the 7th and 8th grade team that went to the high school that had anything but great things to say. So those meetings went fantastic, and to continue to, to put those, lines of communication in place. Some of them are great already, and some of them we're just starting to form. And so, we really appreciate the high school's partnership in that.
Absolutely.
And then also this afternoon, our no name committee, which one of the things this afternoon was to come up with a name. Spent a lot of time talking about homework today, rigor. We'll talk about grading, and the whole purpose of that committee is to make sure we're creating a common student experience. So if a lot of our conversation today was about homework, right? And so if in whatever grade, pick a grade, X grade, if teacher in room A is given 10 minutes of homework, teacher in room B shouldn't be given 70, right? And so to make sure that we're not only on the same page with those things, but that it makes sense philosophically as we progress through the grade levels and then transition into the high school, right? And so, again, we've got data that says that we're on the right track. But our conversations are about good to great, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's about where are the things that we can make this more seamless from a student experience? How can we make that better for everybody? And so, really appreciate the conversations that those staff members are having, and excited to see where that committee goes.
What do kindergarten do for the 90 down? Do they
Pre-K.
talk to?
They go through pre-K.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and that's been, excuse me, sorry. This year particularly, since we have entirely pre-K,
Yeah.
it's been really beneficial because they were part of that conversation last year, and that was probably one of the tougher conversations last year.
Yeah.
And for different reasons, we're under Eckerd's programming down here versus, ISB standards, but kind of think everybody kind of go to the table like, okay, this is a restart. It's a refresh that we have new faces down here, and I know my ladies down here were very eager to be like, what can we do to support these kids when they go to kindergarten? And that's one of the toughest ones because in any given year, only about 20 to 25% of the kindergarten population came out of our preschool.
Right.
And it's just a lot of numbers. And so but we want to make sure that the kids who are coming out of our programming are arguably the most successful kids that go to kindergarten because we have a say in that. We can make sure that we're setting them up for the most success. And I think we've always done it, but again, it's sometimes tough conversations.
Where did those kids go?
What do you mean?
You said only 25% of your pre-K kids?
So our preschool 3 and 4, so half of our population is going to be 3, so they're here for 2 years.
Oh,
anyway,
okay. So
but
it's
then
a skewed number a little. Okay.
So we can only, if we were completely full in our preschool, we can only house 80 kids.
Okay.
And so you figure half that in a good year would be 40, but we very rarely ever get to full max population.
Really?
If everybody who we accepted registered, then yes, we probably would. But for different reasons, people have declined. They decided they don't have transportation, or they want a full day daycare because we're only 2.5 hours per session. So I mean, there's a few different reasons, but we're on track this year to be at least to 60, which we haven't seen in probably 4 years.
So you basically like have way more spots to fill than what you do currently?
Right now, yeah. So we have 2. It's called PFA, Preschool for All. We have 2 rooms. That's Susan Hoffman and Amanda Fulton-Evitz. They have 2 sessions. So each session, each teacher can have 20.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of early on, also we bring back the kids who were here last year who were 3 and now they're 4. We bring those kids in. And we meet and we look at our waiting list. So who else can we bring in? But then they need to go through lease screening. They give them a score basically and the easiest way to think of it is what is their aptitude, what is their ability. The lower the score means the higher the need. Then we have our own score, which is based on factors of high need themselves. So they have a family member who's been in prison. They came from a family that has drug use. Came from a parent that had the child very early. And so different things. Those are kind of the red flag factors. We had to find a balance between those 2 things, and then bring in the neediest kids. But part of the challenge is because we need to bring in the neediest kids. That's one of the biggest things for our benchmarks and everything. But then we also have to make sure we have spots for special ed. And so as kids go through, if they go through the lease screening, they get flagged, like, oh, this kid's low, for whatever reason, we wanna do, do a play-based assessment. So we do some of it ourselves, we do it with lease, our special ed co-op. So for example, like, there's still gonna be another screening here next Friday. So if a kid came through that screening and realized, oh, they're really low, we have to have a spot legally for them if they're special ed. And so some of the spots we have to leave open to kind of play that math game. And then we also have the bilingual classroom, which is the afternoon with Miss Fulton Evans and Jessica Correa, who's our para, who's the bilingual component this year. She's amazing. But you're not going to put a kid who only speaks English in that classroom, because so that room, I think this year right now we have 11 in there. Again, a couple of kids we were like, yeah, come on in, we want you in.
So that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's what, Well, and this year we're being observed by the state. That's just lucky us. It's going to be in December, prime time.
Yay.
And it is what it is. But the state's always like, hey, what's your current roster? Because we had a kid we're going to be dropping him tomorrow, who we welcome him in, but parents never finish the registration process. You have to fill out teacheries and all that stuff, and then you have to get all the medical stuff, and they just been, we'll get it. Okay. Like, at a certain point, we have to just move on. And we've been able to leave that spot open because we weren't currently full. But as we start to try to balance out our numbers, we have to have accurate numbers to look at, which is an ever-evolving conversation between myself, Amanda Simpson, who is our speech path, who does amazing work in our special ed department down here, and Denise Garth, who runs our 0-3 small steps, because she's our big liaison with our police for the preschool. So, it's always those fun conversations. If anybody wants to talk more about that, I'm here too.
Doing great things.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
All right, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
You stayed, didn't you? I didn't look back.
I didn't even look back.
She wanted to walk out with you. Okay. Did you have anything in your superintendent's report?
I was able to edit
Just all your
it
friends?
as I went.
Okay. Board committees and reports, we had none, correct?
Correct.
Items,
All right. We can send them back.
action items. The first item was the abatement of the working cash transfer to O&M. So this was shared in some of our updates, but I don't know if you want to give a quick summary again.
Yeah, originally we had talked about hoping to do this from Health Life Safety. It's going to be far too complicated and actually a little bit counterproductive. And so our budget actually was past having this coming out of Health Life Safety. So like last year, we'll have to amend our budget to make sure that it comes from working cash. The working cash fund is, for lack of a better term, like a district savings account. It's the fund that's really not dedicated to anything. And so right now we have in the neighborhood of between $3.5 and $4 million in that account. And this will allow us to transfer $1 million of that over to building fund to pay some bills. Because if we don't, we will end the year in the negative in the building fund, and which doesn't really mean anything, but the auditors hate it. So
We got a good report, so we should keep doing that.
you bet, you bet.
So, just for everybody's really high level, brief knowledge, life safety money is a little more complicated because it has a little bit more of a tight wrap around what its intended uses are, right?
It does. In order to have in order to spend money out of Fund 90, which is fire prevention and safety, which is very often generically referred to as health, life, and safety. It's with a lot of your facility issues, it has to be tied to things that are existing in architects' reports, in your 10-year audits. And so, there would have been the possibility that had we gone down the path of taking these funds from Health Life Safety, we might have had some additional architectural fees to be able to go in and get some amendments done and have some updates done. And so this is by far the cleanest, simplest way.
Any more questions on it? So it's not new money, it's just money that was gonna go from one account to another, it's just changing. Alright. If there are no questions. questions on that one? If we could have a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the working cash fund resolution as presented.
And a second.
Second?
And roll call.
Landers?
Here.
Rapp? Yes. Beats?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes.
Cost?
No.
Komitas?
Yes. Okay, the next item is the approval of the audit and AFR, which is this annual financial report that we were just presented this morning, this morning. This evening. Are there any questions before we approve what was presented? Okay, if we have a motion.
I move to approve the audit and AFR as presented.
In a second.
A second.
And roll call.
Rapp? Yes. Beats?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes.
Cost?
Yes.
Komitas?
Yes.
Landers?
Yes.
Okay, next item, our MOU. This is the amendment to the teacher contract that was about the annual professional goals. So the portion that was detailing that was moved away, correct?
Correct.
At the actually originating idea from the teacher's side, correct?
Yeah,
I mean,
I would honestly say from the administrative side,
Oh, okay.
but yeah, but very much a joint effort between the teachers and administrators to streamline things. All of their annual improvement, all of their goal setting, all of that is already in existence in 2 or 3 other places, and so all parties involved felt that it was quite redundant. And then the other MOU is with respect to the for just this year, moving our after-school program wage from the contractual 27 to the 40. Again, what we're doing is working. We want to make sure that that's staffed. We weren't able to staff it at the $27
Everybody
level.
seemed so excited last year. Where did that go? They were so happy.
Supply
Where did
demand.
everybody
Teachers
go?
are in demand.
It's
so-
like you can go work anywhere now.
I was like, it's a supply just like any career right
But like
now.
8 months ago, they were jumping up and down saying how wonderful it was.
I don't think
and
it's not that they
now-
don't think it's wonderful. I just think that the
They know
cost-
their value now
Yeah.
more, and they're
And so it's
Holding out
it's
for-
interesting because right now
they're smarter.
ISBE has a statewide after-school program, a tutoring program,
Through NAU.
and
$50 an hour.
and they're reimbursing at $50 an hour. And so,
Yes.
yes, and so at this rate, we've already run the numbers and done the recruiting, and we are going to be able to. It looks like we'll be able to start in full effect at Lincoln and at Northbrook next week, with Blackstone the following week.
Did you get it fully staffed then once you?
Yes, ma'am.
And technically, that's the $40 is a standard at any area district for anything outside the contractual hours, so.
And again, the MOU is for this year only. It's also written in such a way that it doesn't set a precedent for anything. This is, and the association completely understands this. The intent of this is 100% just to get the kid, this group of 100 kids, this extra support that we feel that they need and has been shown to be successful. So.
Very good. Do we have any additional questions on those 2 MOUs? If not, could we have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the MOUs with the MEA for this school year as presented.
In a second.
I second the
Roll
motion.
call.
Beats?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes.
Cost?
Yes.
Komitas?
Yes.
Landers?
Yes.
Rapp? Yes.
Okay. Discussion items, our delegate for joint. We brought this up at the last meeting. We do have to indicate one individual that would like to give up. It's a double conference time in the conference, so it'll take away 2 class times, so to speak. But it is engaging, enlightening, interesting to hear and listen to the debate and listen to what is pressing amongst different districts across the whole.
You do remember last year you said you'd do it this year.
I did it last year. I did it last year and I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
I felt torn because there were so many workshops I wanted to go to.
I enjoyed it.
It is
I enjoyed it.
because you did take away.
Sounds
the
like
learning
you get it,
opportunity.
I enjoyed it last year because it really, like honestly, it really made me think. Like there's a couple things that were brought up, like the like for like districts that had. There was one of the things that was tied was having staff members that could carry if they were trained. And it was they used the district that presented it was Mercer County, that the closest sheriff's department is 25 miles
Oh,
away.
carry students
Concealed
who are
carry.
wheelchair.
Conceal.
Oh, no. Oh,
So
carry.
if you had
Different thing.
if you had a superintendent.
I was thinking medical. You were thinking
No,
safety.
but it really did make me think because, like, not only as a school board member, but made me think of, like, as a teacher, made me think of my niece who is in a rural district that the closest closest sheriff's department is 25 minutes away. You know what I mean? So it did really, and then other ones I was like, why would they even bring that too? So I enjoyed it last year. I know people say it's like, but.
And I feel like Holly did a good job of like kind of recapping us on what she.
Yes,
said
they're
about.
big
shooters. They go.
So what I'm hearing is you're up for it again.
I would be more
deferring one more year.
One more. Don't put that in writing. Come on now.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I
If that
enjoy
was the
things
intruder or
like that,
Right.
but I
Right.
realized that I enjoyed
That
all the
recognition
sessions.
and-
Yeah,
Wow.
And I was,
I think
like
it would
said,
take too long
if I had to
to
do that, I would have missed even a
process
couple of the
all
ones
that
that I
time.
really.
I don't remember any of the ones that I took
least for me,
besides
I
the
don't know.
teacher
I
negotiation
enjoyed them.
contract one I
You know,
took,
yeah.
and I mean, that went great, so.
Yeah.
Indeed, I had them in.
All right.
you
So
know,
is anyone
seventh grade
in
math.
objection of Holly taking year 2 of this?
Not at all.
All right. Congratulations, Holly.
Okay, yay.
You get the extra little ribbon hanging from your thing for
Oh,
the
yes.
year.
Oh, is it extra bling?
There's a little.
Yeah, because you know I'm all
Maybe
about,
now I
you know, Shannon, because you know I'm all about bling.
Yes,
We'll get
that
like, we'll
screams
get like
Holly.
3 or 4 just for being like
First
year
timers.
conference,
You're a
new
first
board
timer.
member,
Here, I'll
yeah.
just tuck that in.
Yeah, ribbons.
We'll call it good.
Yeah.
And Holly will get a paper fan that doubles as your voting.
We didn't vote it. We didn't use that last year. It was electronic. And that's why it took longer, because they had all those issues.
So about the first week in November, you'll get, a couple weeks out, you'll get from me, 2 or 3 pages of a complete litany.
At our house?
These are I'm sorry?
Oh, are you still
Yeah,
talking
you
about
coming
this
by and
conference?
dropping all this off like you did last year?
Well, see, now you have those. I've forgotten about that.
Creeped my mother out.
And so,
This is
with a list of all the
bullshit.
hospitalities, with a listing of, here's when our dinner is, here's, a possible meeting, and you just kind of outline everything. And so if you have any questions now, if you have any questions as we get closer, if we have any questions once we're there, you all have my cell number.
Brad said he'd watch anybody's kids that wanted.
Oh, I'm coming Thursday too.
Taking the train in on
Now,
Friday.
we did that last year, right? We were able to check in on the night before,
Mhm.
like that morning, whatever session, right? We're still.
Just whatever your hotel reservations
Okay.
were when you indicated.
Is
I
everybody
don't
signed
know
up for
if I,
Thursday?
I don't know if I
Not me,
indicated
no.
anything specifically, I just said I was going.
I'm coming Friday.
So unless you've told Socorro otherwise, you're signed up for Thursday through Sunday, is that correct?
Okay, great, and then where are we staying?
Sheridan,
Okay.
always the Sheridan.
Oh, okay, well, I was at the Intercontinental.
Oh.
Tradition.
And I like
You're a
that
lady.
hotel too, so.
So the only problem with the Sheridan is that Saturday, once the parade starts, it becomes hard to have dinner anywhere west of Michigan.
But you could also
there are
get
tricks to it.
stuck on the wrong side of the road and not get to your hotel too. That happened to me last year.
Yeah.
Hyatt's worse though for the parade.
Wait,
What parade is it?
The lights, the
No.
holiday lights parade.
It's the
Chicago has
it's-
a parade every week.
It's at
It's the
night.
huge
Oh.
Chicago
The lit
Christmas
one.
parade.
Where they light,
Oh, the light.
Last year,
Yeah, okay.
Michigan Avenue.
we went down to the, one of the pop-up bars for Halloween, or for Christmas. Yeah, last year, a couple of us did.
But it's a big deal.
But you
What
can
is
see it from the hotel, which my husband discovered.
What night is our board dinner?
Our board dinner's Friday night.
Okay.
I have yet to
Which
know.
means you can't go on your cruise.
I never went on a cruise last year.
No, because it was at 4, and I got to
Yeah,
do
there was
both
an
last
afternoon
year.
one. Yeah, there was an
Oh
afternoon
yeah,
one.
there's a boarding.
Are you going on the cruise
So
this year?
we
4:45.
all, as you promised me last year, but you guys seem to forget, could go. It's quite nice.
Did you go by yourself?
I sure did.
Oh, she met many people.
I made friends. The lawyers loved me. I'm thoroughly
And then
entertaining.
we didn't hire them the next year.
That is true. That is true.
That used to be our law
Sorry.
firm, and we got rid of them.
Oh, it was an us choice though. None of them like will pass here. So there, it was fun.
Sorry,
This
thanks
cruise
for
was
the drinks.
terrible.
Bye.
We're getting rid of you.
Board members are.
No, all good.
So you
All
said
good.
Friday night dinner.
Friday night is the board dinner, correct. And then we'll do some sort of a group meet Saturday afternoon. So if some of you want to go to dinner together, or if you just want to get together and chat, because I know that one of the things was that people wanted was kind of a check-in, so everybody could kind of get together. And so I'll send out all of those details, and you let me know what you need.
Piggyback onto that a little bit. I do have a table with a room for 2 more for the Spartan Smarts night. If anybody wants to join me,
I have a table
on my
for 10.
phone.
Do you have?
Oh,
Do you have
thanks
that?
for the invite, jerk.
Do you have that?
Yeah.
Okay.
This could be fun.
Because
You do
I've got a
too?
table too.
See, look at this. It's gonna be like board
I
member.
don't have
We're buying all the
I'm not
Casey's
even-
gift
I'm
cards.
not even-
Well, look, she's got room at her table. I have a waiting list on my table.
I just.
Oh, boy.
Oh, look at her, like-
She's big time.
But
She's
I
big
don't wanna
I
time.
do have a farmer and his
I'm at
wife who are
9.
coming, so.
Except we're probably gonna fail if it's not like Disney songs or something. Really stupid like that.
And they pull out the history facts.
Yeah.
No, what
They
did
never
Pocahontas
asked me the
do?
question, but I know.
Let me sing
might
it.
reach
If
out
I
to
can
you.
sing it, I'm good.
do they, if we donated something, would they still take baskets?
But you would have to contact-
A lot of us already did in our grade
Oh,
levels,
okay, wow,
but
yeah.
I'm sure they will, Holly.
I'm sure they would. Or
Sure
you
they'll
could
take your
just
stuff.
donate too.
Okay.
Or you can, you know,
Are you thinking like your camp thing?
No, no.
Oh, I didn't know if you were making a camp basket.
No.
you
There
can
were
buy like
stores in
drink
there.
tickets for everybody, Holly, and if that would.
Ooh, yeah, I'll take
I'm a
it.
poor teacher.
She lies. She
The raffle
works
basket
6
themes are
extra.
very representational of
She coaches everything
where a
and
lot
works
of
all
people
summer.
are.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on the conference questions? You'll get details from Brad, but nothing else. We will move right along. And so we have a closed session. I want to have a bigger conversation, but we need to have at least a small one. That we could maybe have the bigger one set sometime ahead of the November meeting for. So if we could make a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing employment and evaluation of district personnel, please.
I'll make a motion to go into executive session for the evaluation and employment of district personnel at 9:05 p.m.
Second,
Second.
roll call?
Comitas,
Yes.
Landers,
Yes.
Rapp,
Yes.
Beats,
Yes.
Schrader,
Yes.
Cost.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I go to the bathroom?
Yes.
Okay.